IB Nation, welcome to the Irish Breakdown Podcast. We are live here on a Thursday, which means if you are living under a rock, Notre Dame has started fall practice. And we had the availability. Brian had the opportunity to be at practice today too. Notre Dame football, everything getting kicked off. We also have very big recruiting weekend. Most people know that today, the 27th of July, Deuce Knight, star quarterback out of the state of Mississippi, 2025 quarterback, is on campus, which will have obviously some updates there. You should go to boards.irishbreakdown.com. So I'm sure I will have some juicy updates on that later today as far as how that great visit went before he goes out of Ole Miss for the 29th. Also have a big recruiting weekend this weekend on the 30th, which is Sunday. The Grill and Chill is what they call it. It is their cookout for recruits. 2025 players. I think we're over 20 now that are expected on campus, and that is also on the visitor list at boards.irishbreakdown.com. So we're going to do a little bit of a visit preview. We're, of course, going to start the show, though, talking about Brian's practice observations from day 2 of Notre Dame football. Also talk a little quarterback conversation for 2025 with Deuce Knight on campus and where this recruitment might go and what the next step is in case it doesn't go quite as Notre Dame would want it. So, Brian, day 2 of being back at practices, man. I know you were super pumped to be back in person this year. How was day 2, man? Everything was good.
No, it was good. Yeah, I mean, we so just so people understand, we saw 5 periods out of minimum 18. They'll have 18 to 21 per period. So we're also not supposed to be talking about injuries and things like that, so we won't get any of that stuff. But people asking, "Oh, this guy wasn't there, that guy wasn't there." They weren't there for the 5 periods we were at. But sometimes guys are getting treatment. Sometimes they're in certain protocols and things like that. So I'm going to talk about what we saw instead of what I think may be the case because of what I didn't see. So we'll focus on that today. So first of all, Ryan, the way the practice went on is obviously they went through stretch and all that kind of stuff. We were outside all day today, which was really cool. I liked, just getting the sun out and being out there, seeing all the guys go through practice. We got to see warm-ups and all that jazz.
It's not terribly hot out there, is it? Because right now the heat index in Jersey is 104. So
it's pretty hot. I mean, it's nothing like that. Good Lord, it's nothing like that. Yeah, we're not in nearly the shape that you guys apparently are.
Yeah,
but it was hot out there. It's pretty toasty outside today, but not unbearable hot or anything abnormal for this time of the year. So what we saw today, Ryan, is we got a chance to watch them go through a defensively and offensively a tackling circuit. So we got a chance to see the running backs a little bit more today. It's more of an, I shouldn't say even tackling circuit because they're not allowed to tackle. It's more of angles, taking proper angles and coming to balance and yeah, exactly. That kind of thing, more so than anybody doing anything related to tackling. So it's not even fair to call that. But we get to see guys run around a little bit. They did a turnover circuit on defense, and then they went right to the shoots and footwork drills. So we didn't see a ton from the defense today in that regard. I think the linebackers are probably the most active of what we saw today. So I had a chance to watch some of the D-line, a little bit of the D-line, not a lot. Watched a lot of the linebackers today. Because, again, if you're watching 5 periods, that's 5 25-minute period, 5 5-minute periods, 25 minutes, and it's not a lot. So if you're going to try to watch every position, you're just going to get very little of all of them. So I tried to zero in on a few. So I spent a lot of time watching linebackers today. Of course, running backs, because there was a couple periods in practice, Ryan, where the running backs were off doing drills while everybody else was not doing like a typical position drill. So I watched them. And then there was also a period where they were going through some different circuit stuff where the offensive line was going through drills. So I got a chance to watch them as well. So, saw a little bit of the quarterbacks today, running backs, tight ends, a little bit of tight ends, but offensive line a lot, linebackers a lot. So we'll focus on those today and then be back at it tomorrow, and I'll focus on other positions. And that's the thing that I'll be doing is, just kind of focusing on different positions on each day. You see a little bit of everybody, but you focus on, because we don't get like one-on-ones. There's no 7-on-7s. There's no team. Right. It's just drills. Yeah. Right. So it's like, well, this guy on scholarship at Notre Dame looks athletic. Woohoo! So, but it is good to see him. Please don't take that I'm complaining about it. It's just like we have to understand the context of what we're seeing so that we don't make too much out of things. But it is still good to see, like seeing Jason Onye in person, Ryan. That's one of the things I talked about in my practice report. Yeah. When you see him really up close and personal, you realize just how big he is. Because he doesn't look that big, because he's not like your typical D tackle where he's got like the big gut and like the really big, he looks not big. But then you see him in person, you're like, it's a pretty big kid. you know, and you see how muscular he is, but then you see how well he moves and you see those type of things. You know, getting to see Charles Jagasaw in person, you see 6'7", 330. You see Sullivan Absher, 6'6", 326. You're like, hope that's not a lot of bad weight. Then you see him in person, you're just like, I mean, because you've seen Sullivan Absher, you're not surprised probably him being 326. He was never 295 like they made him to be. He was always over 300 pounds.
Yeah,
but he's got to reshape his body, but he's not a fat kid, right? And that's
just big.
It's nice to see that when you see him up close and personal, see how they move their feet, those type of things. Now, I can't say all the linemen have good weight. I think Tai Chan needs to work on just reshaping his body a little bit and making some of the weight better weight. Saw that today, but I do like seeing guys up close and personal in those areas, Ryan. There's certainly value to seeing it and seeing guys move around, you know, watching Jadarian Price move around and seeing him with that burst and all those things are important. Eli Raridan's a guy I talked about. So there was a lot of that, but I'll tell you what, there's not a lot else I would have rather been doing this morning than being out there watching. I just wish we could have got a little bit more of it. That's my only complaint today is I wish we could have got a little bit more of it.
That picture that was circulating about Jason Onye last week, I played a little game with my wife and a couple of friends. I was like, how much do you think this guy weighs? And they're like, 230. I'm like, that man is over 290 pounds. Like, that's absolutely insane. So, yeah. And I also saw Charles Jagasaw in person down in San Antonio as well. And he is just a massive human being. Because people started asking it, Brian, and it's a fair question of, you know, is it bad weight? Is it good weight? Like, I completely understand it. But I remember when he was down in San Antonio, he was already 325. And I'm just like, nah, that dude's just a big kid. Like, he's just big. Like, it's not bad. It's just, he's massive. Like I compare him to Trey Smith that played at Tennessee. It's like Trey Smith wasn't fat. He was just huge, man. Like
Quentin Nelson was that way at Notre Dame. Quentin was 330, 340, but he wasn't fat. He was just
massive.
Because I saw Trey Smith in high school, Ryan, and I mean, broad shoulders, big waist. And when I mean big, I just mean circumference, not like my waist is big because I need to lose weight. Like he's just like a kid could be in like 3% body fat and he's going to have a huge belt size, right? It's just big thighs, big hands, like really big hands, you know, big feet, just big head.
Yes.
You know, and Jagasaw's, like you said, that Jagasaw's that way. He's just a big kid, just a really big kid. Sullivan Absher is just a big kid. And Jagasaw makes him look not big. You know who I saw today that was bigger than Jagasaw? Not so much broad, but definitely height-wise and like broad shoulder-wise. Like I should say broad and like the look. Tosh Baker looks big.
Yeah, he's like 6'8". He's the tallest guy on the roster.
Let's start there, Ryan. Let's just kind of start with the offensive line since we're already kind of getting there. Let's just kind of dive into that a little bit of what we saw from today.
Let's do it. So this is, of course, going to go over some of the observations that Brian has on his post-practice observation that's live on irishbreakdown.com. But I will tell everyone, if you're not on the message board, boards@irishbreakdown.com, he always gives the subscribers and the people in the premium message board the first dibs on his observations after every practice. So make sure you go there because you'll get it quicker than absolutely everybody. But let's go offensive lineman, Brian. I know that you already hit on Jagasaw and Absher a little bit, but you highlighted most of the freshman class that was able to be in attendance here, obviously.
Because we got to see him move around, right? Yes. Like that's the thing is we got to see him move around a little bit today, a little bit more than yesterday as we were focused on other things because they were going through some drills. So one thing that I don't remember, we were talking about this today. Vince was there and Chris Summers was there. He was a friend of Vince's. He is helping us out. He was an offensive line coach at a local high school, but you know, we were all kind of watching this part of the drill as they were doing a turnover circuit, and we were all supposed to be watching different things, but we all ended up watching the offensive line. I don't remember Harry Heaston using shoots a whole lot, to be honest with you. And I don't necessarily love shoots for offensive linemen if you have to use it correctly. And I thought the way that they did it with Coach Rudolph today, I liked how they did it, Ryan, because what they would do is they'd get on the very edge of the chute and they would actually step out of it laterally. Almost like they were working to, you know, if I'm a guard, I'm working over to take on a like 4-eye or reach a wide 3 kind of thing, as opposed to just like driving off vertically. Because I'm like, well, you don't really ever. How often does an offensive lineman just kind of go straight ahead? And you know,
you are a man amongst boys if you are just going in a straight line. That means that you just physically dominated your dude across from you.
And the defense is just lining up right in your face. I mean, usually my point is you have someone that's like either in a shade inside, a shade outside. You've got to kind of step to power.
Yep.
And so we saw them doing that. So they weren't just like, because like what I've always seen with like big, tall linemen is when you're just kind of in a shoot and you're just kind of coming straight out, they just kind of lunge over and step out. But today it was like really working on keeping your base low, like step, come across and work for power and drive. And it actually made a lot of sense. They were doing it with like tackles on one side. And then, so like if you can picture it, Ryan, so the shoot's kind of going this way, right? And so you've got a lineman kind of on. So if I'm looking at it and I'm looking at across, there's a lineman facing me on the far left of it coming out, and he's stepping on the pole outside the pole and then like reaching and then driving. And then the other side is they're on the back pole looking out that way, and they're stepping out that way as opposed to having them on the same side. And so it's basically, one of them's like the group of tackles, the other one's like the group of centers and guards. It was actually kind of interesting how they were doing it. But when you watch Jagasol play, you see two things right away, Ryan, is three things right away. Number one, massive. Number two, he moves surprisingly well for a big kid. He really does. He gets out of his breaks. He gets out of the stance well. He keeps his pads low. He drives through contact. He's a big, strong kid, but he just doesn't know what he's doing. I mean, that's really the thing, Ryan, is he doesn't know what he's doing. Like, he's kind of like lunging, and he's like, when he hits, he kind of yanks this way, and it's just like, no, stay square, drive through, all correctable stuff. So you just see that he's still a raw kid, but the tools, like, what I'm talking about, Ryan. Like when you see a kid on film, you're like, yeah, he looks pretty good on film, but he's also 100 pounds bigger than anybody's going against. And then you see him live, and you're just like, that kid just didn't move the way I hoped he was going to move when I saw him live. And I'm sure you've seen this at the combine. I'm sure you've seen it at camps you've gone to. You just like, I was really hoping that guy looked better in person than he did. Yes. That was kind of what I liked about Jagasol is, honestly, if Charles Jagasol, I didn't expect him to be a fundamentally sound, technique machine on day two. I wanted to see, can this kid move like an offensive tackle that is supposed to move? I've seen Ronnie Stanley. I've seen Zach Martin in person. I know what they look like. I know what Liam Eichenberg looks like in practice. I know what Robert Hainsey looks like, Tommy Kramer, Aaron Banks, Mike McGlinchey, Quentin Nelson, Alex Bars. I mean, we can go down the list of all these kids we've seen in person at Notre Dame in these practices, and you know what it looks like. So when we're talking about yesterday, people saying, well, what are you comparing this to? I'm comparing it to, well, what does this running back room look like compared to when I was at Notre Dame's camp watching C.J. Prosise and Torian Folston and Josh Adams and Dexter Williams, or the receiving core with Will Fuller and Chris Brown and Corey Robinson and, all these talented players. Those are what you're comparing it to. So when I watch Charles Jagasol move, I'm like, yeah, okay. I'm seeing a guy that moves and works like the elite guys we've seen. He just now has to learn how to play the game. And you saw that from Sullivan Absher a little bit today too. Now, Sullivan's got a little bit more, I don't want to say, I just don't know a better term to use. He's got a little bit more pudginess that has to be worked on, which that's just his body type. We've seen that. Mm-hmm. But he looked like good. Like you could tell Sullivan had a really good summer.
Yes.
Of just really working and getting stronger. He didn't look as kind of pudgy as he did before.
Well, Brian, can I say I saw him down in San Antonio, and I mean, me and Sullivan talked. Like, I thought he had a little bit of bad weight on him at that point.
Yeah,
I did. But then I saw a picture of him when he was at the Blue and Gold game visiting. I'm like, oh, he's working his butt off. There's no doubt about it, because his body is looking already a ton better, and that's before he even got to campus. So there was some bad weight to work off, and it's totally fine. It's about what you're working towards.
And some of it's still there, but not to the degree that we saw when we first saw him. And the first time I ever saw him in person was that April of the Blue Gold game, the weekend he committed. Right. And so those are good things. Those are things that you want to see. You want to see a guy that's in better shape and those type of things and working on it. But I liked how he moved, Ryan. I don't have a clue, because here's the thing about playing tackle, right? You have to be able to play in space. And that doesn't mean, are you athletic enough to play in space only? That's part of it. You have to be athletic enough to play in space, but you also have to have a comfort level in space. With what we've seen so far, I can't answer that question with Sullivan Absher and Charles Jagasol. I can't. Right. We need to see more. We need to see them with pads on. But the one thing that you do evaluate about young linemen on a day like today is, do they at least have the athleticism and length at the minimum to do it? And there's no doubt those two kids have that. That was an encouraging thing to see. There was no doubt to me that Sullivan has the foot quickness and the change of direction, watching him come out of that with some quickness, even watching him hold bags, because like the way linemen do drills is like you have a group going and then kind of the younger guys will hold bags. Even just watching him hold bags, it's like, okay, yeah, this kid's got something to him, right? It just works in progress. The guy that really impressed me today with his footwork and just how smooth he was Sam Pendleton. Like just watching him go through drills, you're like, okay, you can tell which of these freshmen has 15 practices under his belt already.
Sure.
You know what I mean? There just was an understanding of what he's doing. And Sam was always a guy that I thought, at least as a senior, had probably pretty quality footwork. He did a much better job as a senior, keeping his pads low, driving through that. So he already had that. But I was worried, Ryan, when I saw that he'd gained 14 pounds. Like, okay, I hope it's good weight. And it is. He looks like he doesn't look like a freshman anymore. I'll just say that, right? But he moves well. He's a guy that he's not at guard, Ryan, just because he's a thumper. He's got the ability to move and work and get to the second level, that foot quickness. You watch him drive, because when they do these drills where they're driving out of the stance, you can kind of see, okay, is this guy heavy footed, or is this guy like really picking him up and putting him down without then? Because here's two mistakes that you can make, right? Number one is you get too low or you lunge and you're getting really and you're heavy footed because you're just not real athletic. The other one is you're going really fast because you've stood up and you're basically running. I mean, you know what I mean? Like you see these drills with young offensive linemen. They're like, well, I was going fast. Well, you were standing up running. You're never going to block like that. It's, can you come off? Can you keep that base? Can you keep your feet where they need to be and really power through while maintaining that base? Do you have that foot quickness? Can you pick them up and put them down? Right. And Sam has that. He certainly has that.
Brian, has there ever been a bigger offensive line class of freshmen?
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking 330, 326, 314 Sam Pendleton. Chris Tarrick is over 300 pounds as well. Joe Otting is the lone small offensive lineman right now, and we knew that he was going to be a kid that had to gain weight. Like, this is a massive offensive line group this year, man.
I don't know of one that's this big across the board. Like the 2014 class had Quentin Nelson and Alex Bars. They were both really big.
Sure.
But they'd also had Jimmy Byrne, who wasn't that big, and Sam Mustipher, who wasn't that big. Sam was more like a Zeke Carell body type, even coming out of high school. The 2013 O-line class, Ryan, was really long. Like that class could match this one in height. You had Mike McGlinchey was 6'7", Steve Elmer was 6'6", Hunter Biven was 6'6", Colin McGovern was 6'5", and John Montelis was a short guy at 6'4". But Elmer was like 305. McGlinchey was like 260, 270 coming out of high school. McGovern was 285, 290. Biven was 295, 300. Yeah. Like Montelis was only a big guy, but he was sloppy big. He wasn't like, these are just big kids, Ryan. So to your point, I mean, the closest I could probably think, Ryan, to it was probably the 2017 class. Now, Robert Hainsey wasn't really big, but Aaron Banks was a really big kid. Josh Lugg was a really, 305, 310-pound kid. Aaron Banks was 320. And then Dylan Gibbons was a bigger kid. That's probably the closest to it. But like you said, this is a 4 of them, where the 4th guy in that 17 group was Robert Hainsey, who was closer to Joe Otting than he is to Christopher Tarrick or, Sullivan Absher or Charles Jagasol. So yeah, it's
insane.
It's been a minute. And that was something that was a point of emphasis of Coach Easton last year. I mean, we've talked about this. Like Coach Quinn did some really nice things. He improved some of the athleticism of the group, but there was a lot of guys they brought that just didn't have the frames to get bigger. You think of like Caleb Johnson, really good football player, but just it's going to struggle to have that frame. Emil Wagner's a guy that kind of Michael Carmody, Tosh Baker for a while struggled to handle the weight he had to gain to play tackle. Now he's finally seems like he's the weight he's comfortable with the weight now, and he's moving really well, which was very encouraging to see, and playing with good pad level, because Tosh always struggled with pad level too, Ryan. He just didn't look like a natural bender, right? And he's not a knee bender. Like if you're tall and not a knee bender, you're going to have trouble playing with good pad level. He's doing a better job with that this fall camp so far. I mean, again, no pads on, right? So let's see what the pads look like. But it really seemed like Coach Easton was focusing on size, even the guys they missed on. Monroe Freeling is a massive kid.
Massive,
Like,
yeah.
he's going to end up being 6'7", 315, 320 when it's all said and done, right?
Easy.
Samson Okunlola is a massive kid. Like, even the kids that Austin Saravan, the kid that went to Ohio State, they end up not even passing on, but he was a 6'3", 6'4", 315-pound kid, right? That's why Coach Easton wasn't really huge on the Montgomery kid from Ohio. He wasn't very high on him because he's just like, I want beef in this class. We need some beef. And this class brought it. Now, Christopher Tarrick's probably the one that has the most need for body reshaping.
Yep.
But even when he does that, his weight's not going to get a lot lower. It's just going to be it's going to be in different form.
Type of weight. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But he's going to be a 315-pound kid when it's all said and done, right? So, I mean, and there's still room for Sam Pendleton to maybe add 4 or 5 more pounds. I mean, if Sam Pendleton ends up playing at 320, I'm not going to be surprised because he's got a really nice frame. Sullivan Absher is going to stay in the 320s. Charles Jagasaw is never going to be outside the 320s. I mean, he's going to be a big kid, to your point, and you're going to need some of that. And then you look at like this next year's class and what they're adding. You know, there's a nice little balance. You know, Knapp is more athletic and Styles Prescott, but Styles Prescott has a frame. He's going to be 6'6", 300 plus pounds easily with that frame that he has. I mean, he's already 285. If Notre Dame's able to get Garby Lambert, he's going to be way over 300 pounds when it's all said and done. I mean, he's got a great frame. And then Peter Jones, of course, is a 300 plus pounder too. So it was clear that they wanted to add. Caleb Brewer was going to be that way. It was very clear that Coach Heastan had a desire to add more beef to the offensive line, and that this freshman class certainly brings that. But they're not stiffs. That's the important thing. It's not just big guys that you play in a really tight phone booth, right? These are kids that can move, can get to the second level, can play in space, and do all those type of things once the technique gets there. And that was evident today in drills. Is like, okay, these kids have they need a lot of work. A lot of work. I mean, people talking about is Charles Jackson going to start right now? If you saw him today, you'd say, no way. No way. But I can't wait until he figures it out because those tools are really impressive. That's kind of what you saw from him and Sullivan Absher and Sam Pendleton. I'd say Sam Pendleton right now is the closest to being able to help you right now, which shouldn't surprise anyone because this is practice 17 for Sam Pendleton, where it's practice 2 for Sullivan Absher and Charles Jagasaw.
Right.
It's a big difference.
Well, I saw a picture of Sam yesterday, and I was like, man, Pendleton looks really good, man. Like, he's just a massively put together kid at this point. So he's definitely taken to the strength and conditioning program. He's definitely taken to the offseason. So that's great to hear that the 2023 class of offensive linemen have come up and showed their worth. Let's finish up on the offensive line, Brian, because obviously you talked already about Tosh Baker, who it's great that he sounds that he's playing with a little bit more bend, maybe a little bit more foot quickness, looks more comfortable in his skin, which is great to hear. You also had a note on a couple of the guards that are competing for a starting job. So what do you have on a couple of guards that kind of impressed you today?
Well, I'm just going to watch Rocco pretty much every practice because I just want to see if he can maintain what we've seen so far, right? Like, can you hold that? You know, you showed up in great shape, but what happens when the camp legs start to hit? Because you're never going to be as fresh in the season as you are the first day of camp, right? I mean, that's football, Ryan. That's true for everybody. You know, does he maintain the good footwork and the good quickness? Obviously, today we saw that. And sometimes when we're focused on guys that we're maybe not sure of who they are, we tend to not focus as much on guys we know. So I did want to make sure I watched a little bit of Andrew Kristofic today. He looked good. He's moving with purpose. I'll just say that. Like, Andrew's not like, well, man, Rocco had a good offseason. Guess I'm going to have to, accept this backup job. Now, he's moving with purpose and he's moving with confidence. Is he going to be able to move people, Ryan? I can't tell that today. There's still no pads on. But from an athletic standpoint, I think Andrew's kind of in a little bit of the same boat that Tosh is. I sometimes felt like Andrew lost a little bit of athleticism in the last year when we saw him last year, especially because of the big weight gains that he's had to get up to the level he is. He looks more comfortable now. And you see this a lot, Ryan, in the NFL draft stuff. You'll see those kids that were 260 that get to 300 really quick. Some of them never get used to their bodies. The kid from Ohio State, Nicholas Pettit-Frere, just never got his foot quickness back. Some of these kids that put that weight on early, it takes them a couple years. It's like a growth spurt. And then they finally figure out how to play with that weight. Their athleticism catches up and they become they get there. You never know which one's who's going to be one and who's going to be the other. So it is good to see those guys move around. Now we need to see if Tosh and Andrew can move people. That's still a question mark because we haven't seen that. They weren't movers when they played in the past, but they're definitely moving quickly. Now we need to see if the power are going to fall. And I would imagine it would because they've both added weight.
Yep.
So yeah, you'd hope that it came with power. It was kind of related to the question that I asked Coach Freeman yesterday, Ryan, is like, every year when I get the new roster, I put the weight gains on there of anyone who gained more than 4 pounds. And I just felt like this year there was a lot more 6s, 7s, 9s, 10s, 11s than we have seen in past years. And so then when I see that, my first thought is, okay, I want to see how these guys move. So you want to know why I think the first 2 days are so important? I'm seeing a lot of kids put a lot of weight on. We'll get to Jack Kaiser here in a minute. He gained over 10 pounds since last year. That, to me, it's not a red flag. It just, light goes on. Okay, let's see if he can run with this weight. And you see that with some of these linemen. It's like, okay, these guys are putting on the weight. Are they adding power or with the extra weight? Are they losing agility with the extra weight? Those are all questions. And from the offensive line, there were a abnormally high amount of 5+ pound weight gains on the offensive line this year.
Yep.
2 reasons why, Ryan. I think one of it is it's still a very young group. Joe Alt's still just going into his junior year. But even with like Zeke Correll, even, Joe Alt, who's a junior, gained 7 pounds. You say, okay, well, but are they moving? That's always a question. Are they still moving? And I saw no one take a step back in movement. And matter of fact, I thought they worked quicker because I wasn't at last year's practices. But if you remember, I had somebody videoing the offensive line almost every day as they're going through these drills. So I'm able to kind of compare them. And I like how they're moving. I really am. And they're going to need to because they're going to be asked to do – they're going to be asked – I don't know if you were able to listen to yesterday's show, Ryan. Based on what we saw scheme-wise, they're going to be asked to play outside of the box more this year, if you catch my drift on that. They're not just going to be playing right here as much this year. And they're always – Coach Heasan was always a here to the second level. But the run schemes that they were employing this last year – with Coach Easton, they weren't doing that. It's going to look a lot more like what they were asking those guys to do in 2017 than what they were doing in 2022. So again, it's not the offensive line coach being the reason for it. It's the play calling being the reason for it. We're just going to see them moving a lot. So it was kind of like, well, you're asking them to move a lot, but you're putting weight on all of them.
Right.
But they're moving fine so far. So far, so good, Ryan. We'll see if it continues, but so far, so good on the offensive line.
I'll say what, Brian, how good this offensive line is going to be. I expect it to be very good. It's a question mark, obviously, to just how good as of right now. We're in preseason, but they are certainly going to look the parts. There's no doubt about that. Coming off the bus, you're going to be like, okay.
Yep.
Not too bad.
Yes. Well, when Joe Alt's like, you're not like third, when Blake Fisher's probably your like, because he's the only person right now I have a question about because he's lost a lot of weight.
Yep.
And 310 is still big, but some guys at 310 can't move people the way they could at 325.
Sure.
And so Blake looks great movement-wise. My question is going to be, since he's gone kind of the opposite direction of everybody else, is can he still move people? And we're not going to know the answer to that till the pads come on, but he's moving great. But when Blake Fisher is now like your 5th or 6th biggest offensive lineman at best, I mean, think about it. When Notre Dame, if the starting lineup is Andrew Kristofic and Billy Schrouth at guard, Blake Fisher is your 3rd biggest offensive lineman. If your starting lineup is Rocco Spindler and Billy Schrouth, Blake Fisher is your 4th biggest offensive lineman. So, yeah, they got a little bit more beef to them this year, Ryan. I mean, there's no doubt about it. But they're moving well, and that's going to be the key. This is a big offensive line. And that's partly why Emil Wagner looks so small.
Right.
Just because, like, he's bigger at 288, but he's still like 10, 15, 20, 25 pounds lighter than so many of these other guys. I mean, it's a massive offensive line. It really is.
Really is. Well, I think that balance really matters. It's a great note, right? For a team that we expect to be more diverse with what they're going to run offensively, you need guys that can move and be able to move people at the point of attack. So I think that balance is going to be very important to get to. Brian, we usually start with quarterbacks, but we pivoted to the offensive line for good reason. That's obviously where the conversation was going. You had a couple small notes on the quarterbacks. I saw Kenny Minchie mentioned. I saw Sam Hartman mentioned. What was your quick evaluation or observations of the quarterbacks today?
So we saw the quarterbacks basically going through individual drills and then throwing some routes on air. So we didn't seem like read their defenses and all that. They were working on a couple routes that require them to read across the field. So like sort of the working horizontally across the field. They were also doing some unique drills where they're kind of like doing a handoff and then they kind of got to move out and they get a ball tossed to them and then they got to throw off platform. And just in this particular drill, you could really tell, and Vince will talk even more about it probably tonight, but you could just really tell who was and wasn't comfortable throwing off platform. Kenny Minchie and Sam Hartman, it's second nature to them. And just changing arm angles and all that kind of stuff, they do it second nature. Steve Angeli's really uncomfortable with that. And I've always believed, Ryan, you don't really change that. You don't go from being it's like when remember when a couple of years ago when we were watching the Simses work with Jack Cohn and they're trying to like change his arm angles. Like, guys, he's a 5th-year senior. He's not changing his arm angles, right? I mean, this is who he is. And then when we got to the season, we never saw Jack do that because that's just not who he is. That's kind of how Steve is. So it's not a negative. It's just, you're just not going to ask him to do, if he's your quarterback, if he's your starting quarterback, there's just things you're not going to ask him to do in the RPO game that you may ask Kenny Minchie and Sam Hartman to do. That's just the reality of it. He's going to do more. He's going to do different things because like Bryce Young can throw with different arm angles. Tua could throw with different arm angles. Mac Jones wasn't really a different arm angle kind of guy. So it's not one's better than the other. It's just when one guy's your starter, hey, we can do certain things in the RPO game, play action game, out of the pocket game that we're just not going to ask that guy to do. And you just have to tailor your system to it. So this isn't a knock on Steve. It's just an observation of something he just doesn't do as well as those other guys, in my opinion.
Well, and I think a great point too, Brian, is based upon that. It's just about what you have to teach him, right? Like different players need different types of teaching. And for Steve, if Steve's not as comfortable throwing from different arm angles, you might just need to focus on his footwork a lot more, right? Like you got to get your base in a better position quicker and reset that base, maybe a little bit quicker or faster than what Steve Angeli, what Kenny Minchie has to do, for instance, right? Because he could just throw off of a weird platform and still get the football out there. So I think it'll be interesting. We expect, obviously, there to be a heavier dose of RPO into this offense this year, in theory. So having a couple guys that can do things off platform is going to be very important. But again, it doesn't mean that Steve Angeli can't do that stuff. It just might have to look a little bit different.
Yeah, because you don't have to be a changing arm angle guy on RPOs. It just means there's certain RPOs you're going to do differently.
Yes.
Like some guys can change arm angles throwing vertically. Some guys can only do it throwing a now screen, right? You just have to know your guy and what he's good at. Here's something else I observed, Ryan, that I'm going to start looking for now. And this is going to sound really nerdy, but follow along with me because I think there's something here. One of my complaints I've always heard about Steve Angeli, and you've heard me make it before, and I think you saw it last year with your own eyes when you were at practices. He tends to miss high a lot.
Yeah.
I think I kind of have a reason why. And I've gone back and looked at old photos to try to confirm. So my wife took a lot of pictures of the quarterbacks yesterday. And almost every single shot she would take of a quarterback she would just kind of, click, 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 click through the whole process. So it's like here, 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 here. When Steve Angeli gets here, his eyes go up to the football. He loses his target and he looks at the ball. And then when the ball, because like a lot of quarterbacks will throw it, then track the ball. And so I watched Kenny Minchie, the photos of Kenny Minchie and Sam Hartman, and they're here on the target. Steve gets here and his eyes go up to the ball. On Ryan, I'm going to send you pictures of every single time she has a picture of him about to release the football. He's looking at the football. When you take your eyes off the football, that's going to raise your target level, and it's also going to change your sort of your release a little bit, and that's going to most likely lead you being very high. I'm curious if Notre Dame has seen that, and they need to address that with him,
That's weird.
right?
That's
because
weird.
it's something I think a lot of kids do. It's like, you're just kind of focused on the ball. So I would address that. And if I'm right on that, and I could be wrong, but if I'm right on that, and if it's something he's just doing in individual, it could just be he's worried about maybe I just want to make sure my release point's good. There could be some justification for it. If I'm at Notre Dame, I'm watching during 7-on-7 and team, and I'm trying to get my eyes on that to see if that's happening, because that could be something that could just, if that just throws your release point off by this much, it's going to dramatically change the course of the football. And if that's an issue, they can clean that up. And I mean, that's fixable if that's something that's causing his ball. Because like he's a really fundamentally sound quarterback, Ryan.
Yeah.
When he throws, he was like that at Bergen. So it's like, why does a kid that's got clean mechanics like this not have better ball placement? It was always kind of a bit of a, like, you'd even see him like camp film and oh, look how good Steve Angeli was. And I'm like, that was not where it wanted to be. Like, yeah, he's completing these passes, but the ball placement's not good. And that's good when it's okay when you're going through RVA, but when you're playing team and you're going through 7-on-7s, like that ball placement issues are going to be problematic. I'd be curious if they could address, if they can see that. But I noticed that when I was going through the photos last night. And so I went back to some previous practices that she took photos of the quarterbacks, and I saw the same thing. His eyes would immediately, because he'd be here. And so I'd see the picture here and he's looking here. But the very next shot is here when the ball's about to come out and his eyes are looking at the football. It's very interesting. I've never really seen that before. So I'm curious if that's something that's kind of could be creating some of the issues a little bit. It's very interesting.
Huh. Yeah. I mean, you throw with your eyes and your lead foot. So that's it's very strange.
Yeah.
Very strange.
Yeah.
Shall see.
Very interesting. So
yeah, something to keep an observation out for, I guess.
That's right. That's right.
Speaking of great observations, Brian, you said yesterday you didn't get to see as much of the running backs. Today you got a much deeper dive into the running backs, and it sounds this running back room is going to be pretty good, man. That's what it sounds like to me.
So like yesterday, Ryan, we got to see the running backs during like the 7-on-7 and team stuff, and you're like, "Whoo, boy, these guys are really athletic." But I didn't watch them go through drills. Today I watched them go through drills. And there was a couple guys we didn't get to see as much yesterday. Like I didn't pay as much attention on Estime, which apparently some people took as like, okay, he's not going to be the normal back anymore. Apparently, I have no idea. But so watched him a tad, but not a lot. I really wanted to see Devin Ford a little bit today, and I wanted to see how Jadarian Price looked in drills with change of direction. And is he showing the same burst, cutting off both feet, that kind of thing. And I liked what I saw. In a vertical type of drill, Devin Ford's not going to blow you away. He just doesn't have the same first step explosiveness that Price and Love and Jabron Payne have. I mean, Jabron Payne's got a really nice burst. But what I saw from Devin is he's really quick. He makes very good sudden movements. It's not like super shaky. It's just quick. It's quick. It's just quick. And so when you watch him go through drills, he's got a real subtle shakiness to him, Ryan, where it's not like that elaborate, kind of thing you see like 7-on-7 drills. It's just, boop, 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 just like those little movements. And you saw that in drills today, and it was impressive. And they're doing a lot of things in these drills to get the running backs the football in space in a lot of different ways. He catches the ball real clean, really nice quickness. Not a lot of wasted motion with him. You can tell he's a vet, right? You can tell he's been coached well, because I really like the running back coach Penn State. I think he does a really nice job. So you're getting a kid that's already kind of well schooled. Now it's just about getting him caught up in your system. But I liked what I saw from him today. They also did a lot of pass pro stuff today as well, Ryan, which I like to see. Day 2 of camp, you're already doing pass pro. That was good to see. Not just getting them the football and all those type of things, but they all engaged it. They all put the effort in. But man, the foot quickness and the explosiveness from this group prior to the pads going on is standing out. I was talking with a couple other people today that were at practice, and we were having this discussion too, and we all kind of agreed, like, I've never seen a 5-man group at Notre Dame. We've seen some really good three-man groups, occasionally a good 4-man group, but usually in like the 4-man groups, it's like the Torian Folston, CJ Procise, Josh Adams, Dexter Williams 4-man group, Ryan, was really impressive. But 2 of those guys were true freshmen. You got a senior, a junior, 2 sophomores before you even get to your freshman class. So it's an impressive looking group of players. There's the speed is there, the quickness, and there's different body types. Like Jeremiah Love has a completely different body type than the other guys. Jadarian Price has a completely different body type to Jabron Payne. Jabron Payne's like that prototypical Midwestern running back that you think, Ryan, like 5'10", big biceps, big thick calves, big thick, thighs and butt, and really quick and powerful with some juice. You know what I'm talking about? Like the guys like Wisconsin's had, that's Jabron Payne. And then there's Jeremiah Love, who's like 6 foot plus, slender, really cut up and explosive.
197 right
Yeah,
now. Yeah,
right.
right.
And then Jadarian Price is kind of like, he doesn't have the thick lower side, but then his upper body's just jacked. I mean, they're really all different. And then, of course, there's Audric Estime, who's 230 pounds. But there's different body types there too, Ryan. But the athleticism of this group is just really impressive. It really is. Like, I made a comment yesterday, like Audric Estime is the slowest running back they have, probably by a decent amount. And people took that kind of the wrong way. What I'm saying is, think about how athletic you have to be for Audric Estime to be the guy that is least impressive athletically. Just pure speed and movement skills. That's impressive because we know Audric. I mean, again, last 10 games, 6.6 yards per carry. And him and Devin Ford are kind of down here at the bottom as far as athleticism. That's an exciting thing because we know who Audric is. We know what he can do. This group's got a lot of ability, Ryan. There's no doubt.
I mean, it's an embarrassment of riches at this point. I know, obviously, Devin Ford didn't have the career at Penn State that he wanted, but I mean, that kid was a high-caliber 4-star player coming out of high school as well. Yeah. So, I mean, you're talking about a bunch of 4-star kids, a couple top 50 kids in there with the Jeremiah Loves of the world. So, I'm excited about running back, man. I know that some people have question marks outside of Audric because of, some injuries and some younger guys, and I completely get it, but I'm excited to see what the running back room is going to do this year, and off to a good start, it seems.
Yeah. I mean, athletically, right? Yes. Like receivers, you're defined when you're a ball carrier, you're defined by what you do when the pads come on, right? But it's a great place to start. It's a great foundation to start.
Yep, no doubt. Last note that you had, Brian, was you kind of had a little bit of notes on a wide receiver as well as a couple tight ends. So maybe we'll group this one together as pass catchers.
Yeah, just real brief because I didn't watch them a ton. We kind of know what Jaden Greathouse and Rico Flores are going to do. So drills don't matter a whole lot for them. I don't really care what Tobias Merriweather looks like in drills. I don't care what Jaden Thomas and Chris Light. But reason I watched a little bit of Braylon James today, because in the spring, Braylon fought the ball a little bit because he was thinking about so many things. He would just fight it. You know what I mean by that, Ryan? Like he wasn't clean. He wasn't confident. He wasn't crisp. He was just like, he was thinking about my top end and am I taking the right angle? Oh, shoot, the ball's coming. You know what I mean? And it's just like, he would fight a little bit. Yeah. Well, yesterday I saw a little bit of that okay, he was better yesterday. Okay, it was at first day, but then today too, I'm seeing him, dropping balls over his outside shoulder, balls that are a little extended. He's reaching out and making nice catches for me. That great one-on-one catch yesterday over Jade Mickey. So that was an encouraging thing to see. Like, was it mental for him in the spring? He's just trying to get caught up for everything, or does he just not have great hands? And so seeing him catch the ball clean and crisp and just not thinking as much. Now, he still has a lot of work technically, like he's still thinking. And I would imagine there's probably going to be some times in team where he is fighting the ball. But again, that tells me that's a mental thing of he's just got so much on his mind. But once he is more comfortable with the technique and the assignments and the alignments and all that kind of stuff, then he'll be back to clean and catching the ball clean. Because in drills, like if a guy doesn't have great hands, he's going to not have great hands all the time. Now, some guys don't have great hands in the team period because mentally they're just not comfortable and they're not thinking. They're now thinking about it, right? As opposed to just doing it. So when you're an individual and doing stuff that they were doing today, you're going to see a guy just naturally do what he's comfortable with. So to see Braylon catch the ball clean today, to me, was really good because the speed's there. And you see that in every drill they do. You're like, that guy comes off the line with a little bit different burst than everybody that's not named Chris Tyree. That's just what you see when you watch these drills. I mean, because like Tobias is really smooth, and Tobias has some decent top end speed too. But Tobias is a build up your speed kind of guy more so. But he's just more fluid and smooth. Where Braylon just has that just at the snap, just bam, he just kind of comes off the line with a different speed today, or any day really. But now to see him catching the ball clean, you're like, okay, he's getting there. Like he's going to need some time, but yep, the tools are all there, Ryan. That's the whole point, right? We're going to find out if Braylon James can ever develop into a great receiver, but he catches the ball real nicely and he's really explosive. Eli Raridan, same thing, catches the ball really clean. I wanted to see him cut off of both feet today. And his burst off the line is really impressive. I mean, fastest 10-yard split in the history of tight end play, as we all know. Sarcasm for those people who are new to the channel. But to see him, Ryan, coming off of a second-string knee injury, it's like, okay, is he going to favor the injured knee? I watched him make cuts today going left and right, and it was no tentativeness. That's a mental thing that's like, okay, check. right? All right, cool. But man, he is a physically impressive looking kid. He's the most physically imposing tight end they have, which surprises me because I knew he was tall, but I mean he's got huge arms. I mean he has not missed curl day in a long time. I'll just say it like that, right? He has definitely not missed that. He's a very impressive young man athletically, but it hasn't caused him to get slower or tight. He's
Right.
still a very fluid athlete, just an explosive fluid athlete. But the mental block of getting past the tentativeness of the knees was nice to see that today. And then Holden
awesome.
Stace looked like he did yesterday, just really smooth and fluid and fast. That's an impressive 1-2 punch of young tight ends, man. Really impressive.
I'm telling you, man, if Eli can get back healthy and stay healthy, that sophomore tight end group is pretty dang good, man. It's talented. It's really, really talented. So I'm looking forward to seeing what Holden can do, obviously using the spring momentum that he has, being one of the only few healthy tight ends in the room during the spring and transitioning that momentum this offseason. Great to hear that Eli is starting to look like himself coming back from that injury as well. So a lot of great offensive notes. We're going to go over to the defensive side of the ball. Just click like button, subscribe to the podcast, 5-star reviews, all those great things. We'll get into the defensive side of the football from today's practice observations. Brian, usually we start with the defensive line, but your first notes of the day were about some senior linebackers that everyone likes to throw shade at. So let's start there.
So, well, just the reason I don't have a ton on the D line and the DBs just because of the nature of what they were doing today. There just wasn't a lot to evaluate. Hey, guess what? Benjamin Morrison looks good in the back pedal. All right. I mean, okay. But yeah, the linebackers, one of the guys that I kind of had my eyes on, I want to see how he moves in camp.
Yep.
So when I saw Jack Kaiser's roster number,
232,
232.
Right? Yeah.
He was like 223 last year, but he was playing barely 220 the year before. You're like, okay, 5th-year seniors don't usually make healthy 9 to 10 pound weight gains. That's more of a, hey, we need you to play inside more, put weight on. And it's not that it's bad weight, it's good weight. Jack, he looks like $1 million, but that extra muscle, 8, 9, 10 pounds of muscle can make you get stiff and tight and lose some explosiveness. That was a big fear I had with Jack Kaiser, because the one thing Jack can do, as we've always said, is he can run. Well, Ryan, I can tell you he has not lost a step at all. I mean, if anything, that first step is like every bit as good, if not maybe even a touch better than it was in the past. So he's moving around really well. Like he looks every bit as thick as JD Bertrand now. Like seriously, I mean but still moving very, very, very well.
Which makes sense because I think JD's number was 233 on the roster, and then Jack's was 232. Yeah. So
but you'd see it on film last year. JD just looked thicker than Jack, right? I mean, they're very similar, like height wise and all that, but like from a thickness standpoint, it was very obvious that JD was thicker than Jack.
Well, one was definitely a Mike, the other was definitely a Rover.
Correct.
Like, there's no doubt about it. Yes,
they look very similar now, like size-wise, but Jack is still moving very well in the drills we saw. The foot fire is really good. The doing the lateral stuff, that's really clean, and then the get downhill, that was really clean. And this is something minor. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to translate but just watching him pop the sled today, there's just a little bit more to it with the lower body, just a little bit more boom through the hips, and you can tell that I'm in football coaching mode because I've said the word boom about 37 times in the last 2 shows. But you could just see that explosive. It's just a little bit more explosiveness through the hips. Right now, here's the question for Jack is as you get deeper into fall camp, can you maintain that weight and from a conditioning standpoint? You never know until you do it, but the way he was moving around today, Ryan, it looked very natural for him. So that was good to see, which then leads to potentially the opportunity that potentially he could play more inside this season in the nickel sets, which is very important.
I was also interested to see, Brian, because I know you had a note on Maris Loifeld. Maris also had a little bit of a weight gain this year. He's up to 239 pounds right now. Athletically, how's he looking at 239?
I mean, he actually looks so. One of the intel pieces we got this summer, Ryan, really was more in the spring, kind of like post-spring summer workouts. Was that Marist was looking a little bit more burst, a little bit more, lateral quickness is better. Not that the speed was better, because the speed was fine, but just movement wise, lateral quickness, plant and drive, change of direction was just better now that he's an extra year removed from the lower body injury. I see that. I mean, just the movement skills, Ryan, just the really clean side to side, really nice plant and drive downhill. None of that none of the stuff we saw today from Jack and Maris and JD, none of that is going to tell us if they're going to be good linebackers or not, right? But you got to have a baseline to start with. And on day 2, it's, are you moving around? Because the worst thing, and I know you've dealt with this too, Ryan, as a player and a coach, is you get that guy that put on that, I need to gain 10 pounds this offseason.
Right.
And then they show up and you're like, this guy's not moving well. So then your whole camp is geared on, we got to reach, get that bad weight off and try to get your foot quickness back, those type of things. So you always want to see, okay, are they moving well with that extra weight? Sure. And, Maris he doesn't look 239. He's put together pretty well. He's got his hair's a little bit is like more braided. So it's like it was in the bowl game. So it's hard sometimes to pick him out. I forget where he is because I'm looking for the hair, but that kind of, this is going to sound weird, but like the way his hair is now, it almost, you see the upper body, you notice the upper body a little bit more now, where it's like the big head looking thing because of the hair was coming out. You maybe mask just how broad shouldered he is. If that makes, does that make sense what I'm saying? Like it just kind of, okay, where does his hair end and his shoulders begin? I'm not trying to be silly here. I'm saying like it was harder to evaluate it because there was just so much more going on. Well, now with his hair kind of braided, you don't really see his hair. It's like you can barely see it hanging out the back. So you notice a little bit more that he's got a little bit broader shouldered, a little bit thicker. He's carrying that weight really well. And the movement was there today as well, Ryan. Now, again, movement and speed was never Maris Luafau's problem. Right. But it is still good to see, like you said, 239. Is he moving well? Does he still have that pop? Those things were all there today. And that was good to see. But it's the young guys, Ryan, that you talk about. That's just a different deal right there athletically.
Yeah. Well, the 2023 class, it's a perfect segue. You had Drake Bowen, you had Jay Nosbury, and Preston Zinter, all of which were early enrollees. So they are also 17 practices in, like you were kind of talking about with Sam Pendleton. So they've gotten the whole off season. They had the spring. It should be no surprise, based upon if you were with us in the spring, that this freshman linebacker group looks like it could be special. So your observations from those 3 youngsters today.
Well, Preston Zinter is a guy, the thing that pops out about him is he's got the biggest frame at linebacker of any of the linebackers. Like, okay, that guy could go play H-back. That guy could put on 20 pounds if you needed him to and go play H-back. That guy could put on 30 pounds and go play Viper if you needed him to. I'm not saying you're going to do that. I'm just saying that's something that pops out at you. But, smooth athlete. He's not as explosive as the other linebackers on the roster, but he's very smooth. And he's got his gear is impressive. And you saw that in some of the pursuit drills today. Like when Preston doesn't quite have the same short area explosiveness of Jaden and Drake and the other guys. But when he gets moving, his long speed, and when I mean long speed, I mean after like 30 yards, he's finally running. I mean, like after 5 or 6 steps and he just turns it loose in space, he can run. I mean, he's really got some juice. So it was good to see that. Drake Bowen is very twitchy.
Yes.
Very twitchy. And like just does little sudden things. You're just like, that guy's just moves different, right? And there's a lot of that in the freshman and sophomore class, Ryan. Like you get on the field and you just see these guys and you're just like, that cat moves different. You guys talked about that with Benjamin Morrison last year, right? Like that guy just is a different gear than everybody else. There's a lot more of that in the freshman and sophomore classes than you see in the upper classes. And that's true of the freshman linebackers. They just move different. Blake already looks physically like he's got to get a little bit more defined in the upper body. Like he's a freshman. He doesn't quite have the definition, but he's still a muscular kid. It's going to sound funny, but he's kind of built more like a baseball player still than a football player. He's a big athletic kid. He just doesn't have that, like that same look, but he's 18-year-old freshman. That's going to come. But what you see is a really strong lower half, but not a big lower half where you worry about, is he going to slow down? Is he too big in the lower body? He's just a really well put together. He carries 235 really well. And his short area quickness, like he he's like a prototype inside linebacker, a modern inside linebacker with that range and speed. And it takes him 2 steps to be full speed with power. It's an impressive thing. Now he's got to learn, technique in the defense and all that. But man, he's an impressive athlete. And you can just watch Drake in practice when Bulla's talking or Coach Golden's talking to somebody else. He's just kind of zeroed in.
Listening.
Yeah. You can just see that. Like he's trying to learn. That's a good thing. And you see that with Jaden Alsbury too. Jaden Alsbury is similar to Drake from an explosiveness standpoint, but his acceleration is really impressive. And he is smooth, Ryan. Like he just glides. It's almost like Drake is twitchy, like just plant, and he just looks like he's shot out of a missile.
Right.
Jaden just it's like he's floating. He's just smooth, man. It's just like change of direction is like an easy thing for him. His feet just move so light and nimble, but he's also really explosive too. It just looks different. He just moves different than other guys, which leads me to believe this is the kind of kid that if he can maintain this level of athleticism, can be a situation where he could be more of a Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah than a Jack Kaiser at Rover. What I mean by that is I'm not trying to say Jaden is going to be as good of a player as Jeremiah. What I'm saying is when Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah was at Notre Dame, you could play your 4-2-5 with a true Rover in your nickel situations as well. You could play it in passing down. So when you played North Carolina in 2020, you didn't have to sub him out and go nickel, because he could do a lot of the coverage things that you would get out of your nickel. There was that range and those type of things. I don't know how much you can do that in a man defensive scheme. We'll see. But the point is, you can play him in space in all situations the way he moves if he can maintain that. He's just a really rangy, which, again, you don't think barely 6 foot. You don't think rangy when you hear that kind of athlete. But he is.
You think short legs and pitter patter and all that stuff. Yeah,
he is smooth and rangy. I really like the way he runs around. Like even little things like, Ryan, they're doing this drill where they were simulating like a boot, like a tight end running back catching like a little, either a slide route, a check slide, or a better way of doing like a free release screen. You block down and then you kind of release out of the flats, you catch the ball here and then you turn upfield. And then the linebackers were working on their pursuit angles. Mm-hmm. And even just watching that, you're like, that kid just moves at a different speed than everybody else. Like he's just a different kind of athlete. Now he's got to learn the defense. He's got to get stronger and all that. But you just look at it and you're saying, man, this is a really athletic group of players.
Yeah.
Really athletic group of players.
I mean, I'm excited about this young class, man. I mean, because obviously not focusing too much on defensive line today, Brian, but I mean, hard not to get excited about seeing Armel Mukam up at 280 pounds, like hard not to get excited about stuff like that as well. You had one other weight gain observation that you wanted to talk about. I know you already hit on, of course, everybody's favorite offseason sleeper, Jason Onye, but also Riley Mills, who's making the move inside, up to 306 pounds this offseason after being 296 this spring listed. Sounds like it's a good weight that he also put on.
Yep. I'm sorry. This person in the chat talking about how practice started at 9:30 and it's already over. Is this like the Junction? Am I getting punked here or something like that?
Boys.
Like, what is going on? Is this Junction Boys again? Practices are never more than 2 hours long, like anywhere. What are we talking about? It's 2:00 in the afternoon. Like, so yes, there's a reason practice is over. I have no clue what's going on right now. Right? I sometimes think I'm just getting punked or something like that.
Well, they have to limit the amount of time that you have with the athletes each day, and some of it has to go towards weightlifting, and some has to go towards meetings.
Ryan, we're talking about if practice was still going on now, we'd be talking about a 4.5 hour long practice. Like,
I've never had one of those
over
before.
already. Like if the practice was still going on when this show started at 1:00. It'd be 3.5 hour long practice. I can't tell you the last time I was ever heard of a 3.5 hour long practice.
I've never been.
I have no idea what's going on
or
right
a coach. Like,
I just keep seeing the same person saying that over and over and over again, and I'm like, is this a joke? Like, I don't know if they're joking or not. So I'm sorry, I got a little distracted by that. But
practice, we're talking about practice.
That's strange. Riley Mills. Here's my concern, Ryan. Riley's up to 306.
Yeah,
and he's really big. but I wanted to see, does he still have does he still keep that burst? Does he still have the explosiveness? So just watching him go through a couple drills, it's not a lot, right? And so you can only tell so much because he's not engaging and then shedding and getting the backfield. It's just hitting a shed or hitting a sled, and it was like the 5-man sled. But just watching him come off the line, the foot quickness, the hand fire, the explosiveness, you saw the athleticism is where it was. He didn't lose a step by getting, because he's probably 15 pounds heavier than he was last fall and about 10 pounds heavier than what he was in the spring. So seeing him move around, very good weight. It's all up here. All his weight gain is all up here and in the thighs. There's no like extra gut to hold up at the point of attack. I didn't mention this in the practice report, but I do like how Gabriel Rubio is showing a little bit more lateral movement capability this year. He's never going to be a super smooth lateral mover. He's always going to be kind of a bull in a china shop, vertical kind of phone booth kind of guy. But seeing a lot more of him showing a little bit more ranginess, moving side to side in some of the drills today, that was encouraging to see. But they just look so much bigger inside this year than they did last year. Rubio's about 10 pounds, at least 10 pounds heavier.
Yeah.
Chris Smith was stout, but he was thick, but he was really short. Now you got Howard Cross at 6'1.5", 288 pounds. He's about 15 pounds heavier than he was last year at this time, and still moving very well. But now you went from 6'3", 285-pound Jason Adamiola to 6'5.5", 306-pound Riley Mills with 3 technique. Gabriel Rubio went from about low 290s last year to now 306 pounds. He's a big boy. Jason Onye, you went from barely 6 feet tall Chris Smith, 320 pounds, to now 6'4.5" Jason Onye, who's 290 plus, but just looks really big. And so they're much bigger than they were last year up the middle. That's a good thing to see, but none of them have lost a step, right? They're not adding size at the expense of foot quickness, and those are the things you look for in the first couple of days of practice.
It's quickly changed the opinion of the interior defensive line just from last season to now, Brian. Literally, you're going to try out multiple 300-plus pounders, and basically everybody's now is, Howard Cross is the smallest guy listed right now at 288 pounds. It's going to be a regular on the interior. That's just kind of where we are. Yeah. So now you have 288, you have 2 300-plus pounders, you have a 294 in Jason Onye. Notre Dame is quickly, not even counting like Aiden Kiana if he's able to get some reps this year. He's also over 300 pounds. Notre Dame has a lot more beef inside defensively this year. There's no doubt about that. No doubt.
Yep.
So I believe that is going to conclude the observations for practice. We talk about practice. Yeah, we talk about practice. Any last minute observations, Brian, before we get into a little bit of
I'm just glad we're going to get to see him tomorrow again, and we'll get to see him a couple times next week. Just to see different parts and see how guys are evolving, and who looked great on day 1, but is running with camp legs already in day 5. It happens every year, right? That some guys like, oh boy, I exerted a little bit too much energy on day 1 and 2, or I just wasn't in maybe the shape that I needed to be from a conditioning standpoint. Or do they maintain it, right? This team looks really good, Brian, from the standpoint of, like we were talking today. I don't remember anybody like barfing in practice. That may sound weird to some of you, but if you've ever been around a football team, like that just doesn't not happen. I don't remember a single kid yesterday.
There's kids that go to rookie mini camps in the NFL and start barfing. So this happens.
And I know it was a 17-period practice yesterday, but it was outside almost the entire time. It wasn't hot, but it was really humid. And today it's like 80, but it's really humid. And I don't see anybody, guys getting water. They're hydrating a lot. They've got that's all the same, but you just don't see anybody like really tanking so far. Now that I want to see that continue, right? But they just look in great shape. You know what I mean? Like they just look like they've put on really good weight. I don't see anybody outside of a couple linemen that seem to have bad weight on. You got some younger guys. They look stronger. Cam Hart just looks more filled out, but it hasn't affected his movement at all. Benjamin Morrison, his weight hasn't changed on the roster, but he just looks thicker. Hasn't affected his movement at all. The receivers are smooth. They look to be in great shape. That's a good thing. Their conditioning seems to be really good. Now we just need to see him maintain it. So I'm happy with day 2, but this is just part of the process, right? It's the building blocks, and I'm looking forward to kind of seeing last couple of days of what they're going to do. I'm probably going to try to spend a little bit more time on the D line tomorrow. Hopefully they do some drills that allow us to see them kind of get turned loose a little bit. Yeah. Otherwise, it's just going to be like, well, yeah, this guy looks the part. Oh, by the way, Boubacar Traore might be one of the longest human beings I've ever seen in my life. Like, he's in like a drill. I'm curious where they're going to play him right now, because he looks like he could play Viper right now. I
was going to say he's like 237.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
but
yeah.
He is definitely thinned out from his high school film, but it's probably good thinning out. He's going to put a lot of good weight on over the next year, but he is so long. He was like in a drill where he's like in a 2-point stance.
Yeah.
And he's bending his arms. His arms are bent like this, but they're still hanging way below his knee. It was just like, this guy is long. Armel Mukum is going to be an interior guy. Like, his days of being an edge player may already be over. I mean, he looks, he looks like, Ryan? He's like a dead ringer body type wise for Jay Hayes. Remember Jay Hayes? Who Notre Dame absolutely should have moved inside. Jay Hayes should not have been a defensive end in 2017, but you didn't have anybody else, right? But body type wise, Ryan, he is a longer Jay Hayes. That's what Armel is. He's not as tall as Boubacar. Boubacar's at least 6'4.5". Like, Brendan Vernon and Boubacar are both really like tall kids. Armel is much shorter. He's 6'3", but he's got super long arms. But he is a thick kid. And it's not bad. Like, when I saw 280, he was one of the guys. I was like, okay, what's the weight? Is he like, has he got bad weight? Did he put a lot of it in his midsection? He's just thick, Ryan. Like, just big old backside, wide hips, big thick lower body, big calves, broad shoulders, big arms, big chest. He's a thick kid. He's going to be 300 pounds. And I wouldn't have said that based on high school film. I don't know that I would have seen that, but you see him up close and personal. He's already 280. That kid's going to be at least 295, 300 pounds and be athletic and super long. He is a really long kid.
Well, I remember the last time I talked to him, it was before he was enrolling, and he was already up to 265, 270 at that point. So I was like, oh, man, he's gaining some good weight. I mean, and he's a really hardworking kid, so I'm not surprised that it's good mass that he's putting on right now. Brian, to think Woodbury Forest if they have a hockey program, he could be playing college hockey somewhere instead of football. I mean, to just think about that. But
Woodbury Forest, this little tiny private school out in the middle of nowhere, is going to end up producing 3 really good football players for Notre Dame.
Yes, they are.
Because you had CJ Procyse and Greer Martini, who were high school teammates.
Yep.
And now Armel Mukum. Like, wouldn't have guessed it.
Yep.
Wouldn't have guessed it. But he's an impressive looking kid.
I still want to see the past highlights of him playing hockey, but that's a conversation for a different day. But so that's going to conclude today's observation talk from Notre Dame's second fall practice. Make sure to stay tuned. Again, Brian will be back on the beat tomorrow to take it another practice and be able to give you all some instant analysis.
Yeah, we're going to go to that a little bit before the mailbag. It won't be a ton, but we'll have a little bit of that before the mailbag. Correct.
Yep. So we'll bang that out before the mailbag tomorrow and lead you all right into, of course, Friday free-for-all mailbag. We're going to get into some recruiting talk next, including some 2025 quarterbacks and a little bit of a preview of the Grill and Chill recruiting event this weekend. Before we do, you just hit that like button for me. Subscribe to the podcast, that notification bell. You need to hit that because we're going to have a lot more shows coming up here very soon, including tonight on IB Nation Sports Talk, where Vince is also going to give you some of his takes from practice as well. Yeah. So make sure you hit that notification bell. If you're listening to us on your favorite podcast platform, 5-star reviews are always very, very much appreciated. If you want the early intel on practices, boards.irishbreakdown.com is the place to go. Of course, we'll have the free content as a little bit after that has been published on the board every single day from the practice reports at irishbreakdown.com. Make sure you hit all those buttons. We'll be back in a sec.
So, Ryan.
Yes.
It's now your turn, man. I did all the talk in the first segment. Now it's your turn. I'm excited that football camp is back in play, but recruiting never stops, man. And Notre Dame's got a big-time kid on campus today. Deuce Knight, quarterback from Mississippi. Let's have at it, Ryan. What's the latest? What does this visit mean? Let's hear it. Let's talk about it.
So obviously, Deuce had made his first visit to campus this past offseason. He's out of Lucedale, Mississippi, 6'4.5", 190 plus pound quarterback in the 2025 class. The top target on the board for Notre Dame right now in the 2025 class at the quarterback position. You turn on your film with Deuce Knight. He is a dynamic athlete, can run, has a crazy strong arm, incredible upside, probably as much upside as just about any quarterback in the 2025 class. As of now, how it's been trending this offseason is Notre Dame and Tennessee are the two teams that have separated themselves among that. He'll also be on the 29th, which is 2 days from now. He will be in Ole Miss, and of course, he's a Mississippi kid, so he's going to go take a look at the University of Mississippi, Ole Miss. But we're sitting here today. Notre Dame and Tennessee seem like they are the leaders in the clubhouse. I think this is a tremendous opportunity having him on. He got on campus yesterday, and he's going to be on campus throughout the rest of today. And I think it's a tremendous opportunity because when we were going into the last visit when Deuce came here, Deuce was incredibly intrigued by Notre Dame because the coaching staff had made them a priority. Since day one, they're like, "You're our guy, Deuce. You're our guy. We love you. We want you to be a part of this program." And he loved that attention. He was like, "Oh man, these guys were serious about me. Like, they're very serious." Gets to campus the first time, goes incredible. Notre Dame was able to separate themselves among that top group coming out of the last visit. This return visit's coming down the stretch here because the plan as of today is still for Deuce Knight to make a decision this summer that is still on the table. Notre Dame has separated themselves in the top two. If he's able to have another big visit, Notre Dame has a legitimate shot to close on one of the most talented quarterbacks in 2025. So getting him to have those feelings that he had on that first visit, to really get to visualize himself a part of the Notre Dame program, wearing that blue and gold, seeing a practice, all those things are incredibly important to be able to show Deuce Knight over the last day and a half. So it's coming down to the wire, man. And Notre Dame's done a really good job with Deuce Knight. Can you get a kid out of Lucedale, Mississippi to come up and play Notre Dame football? Because you haven't signed one since 1997 out of the state of Mississippi. So it's been a long time.
At quarterback you're talking about, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. But certainly Deuce Knight is a player that Notre Dame wants, and they're trying to show that to him again and trying to close the deal on him potentially today on a visit.
Ryan, let me ask you this question regarding Deuce Knight, because here's my read on it, and I want to kind of lead into a question and see what your thoughts are. I think Deuce loves Notre Dame. I do. Yep. I think he's very intrigued by Notre Dame. His relationship with Gino Guidugli is outstanding.
Yes.
That's a big reason Notre Dame is in the mix. But my fear is everything in his head could tell him Notre Dame is the best place for me, but I'm not going that far north. That's my fear. So what does Notre Dame have to do to, in your opinion, to win this one? Because I think my fear is if you were saying, hey, Brian, you've got to bet your mortgage on one of these, he's either going to pick Notre Dame or he's going to stay in the South, I'd probably lean towards him staying in the South just because, like you said, there's a reason that it's been a long time since Notre Dame signed a kid from that far south. I mean, I'm trying to remember of the quarterbacks that Notre Dame has landed. I mean, you've had a couple great ones from South Carolina over the years, right? Tony Rice back in, was it 86? Obviously Everett Golson in 2011, but most of your other quarterbacks have been California kids, or I mean, Brady Quinn's an Ohio kid. Jarius Jackson was from Mississippi, right? Correct.
Yes.
That's correct. The last one they signed, right? Eric Chappelle back then, but it's been Brady Quinn from Ohio. It's been Jimmy Clausen from California, Dan Chris from California, Andrew Hendricks from Ohio, Tommy Reese from Illinois, Gunnar Keel from Ohio, Deshaun Kaiser from Ohio, Malik Zaire from Ohio, Brandon Wimbush from New Jersey, Phil Dracovic from Pennsylvania, Ian Book from California, Brendan Clark from Virginia is like about the most southern you've been, and where Brendan Clark is in Virginia, he ain't southern. Okay. Right. So as someone from Southern Virginia, he ain't Southern. So it just, the track record makes me nervous. What does Notre Dame have to do in this recruitment, especially during his visit, to break down that barrier and say, hey, man, take that bold step and make this move? What are your thoughts on that, Ryan? Just because you've gotten to know Deuce a little bit. This is just me reading trends and history and patterns. I don't know Deuce at all. So I'm just curious, since you do, what you think needs to happen for Notre Dame to get there.
I'll say this because I've asked Deuce about a couple schools, obviously outside of Notre Dame, to really kind of dig into his background in the past. And Brian, I understand that I'm a Notre Dame recruiting guy, right? So there might be a little bit of an asterisk next to this one, but Gino Guidugli is easily the coach that he talks about most out of any school that you ask Deuce about.
Mhm.
That relationship's real, man. That's real. And I think that the great thing that you have at Notre Dame is you have a balance of different types of coaches, right? You have Gino Guidugli, who's incredibly laid back, who's incredibly fun and thoughtful, and a guy that people can really bond with from a quarterback perspective. But then you have someone like Marcus Freeman, who I think gets looked at as a role model. Like I think he really does. So you kind of have a different variation of coaches on the Notre Dame staff, which I think is very important. But honestly, I think it's going to come down to relationships for Deuce if Notre Dame is able to land him, right? Like that's the biggest thing. And seeing a practice, I think is big as well. Seeing them throw the football around a little bit. Because again, if Deuce Knight is just watching 2022 Notre Dame, he's going to be like, I'm not so sure I want to be a part of that passing attack.
Correct.
Like I'm not,
yeah.
not so sure.
If Tennessee and Notre Dame are your finalists,
yeah,
and you're just going off of what Notre Dame was, yeah.
exactly.
And so what you're saying is, if you're Notre Dame today in practice, you're going to be doing a lot of pass game work today, right? We'll do run game when we get the pads on. We're going to throw the ball all over the field today and show Deuce what we can do.
He came in the spring as well, and he was there for a practice as well. So this is going to be a second time seeing Notre Dame offensively in a practice setting, which I think, again, is big because also that will show progression, right? Like, what did Sam Hartman look at the spring comparative to how comfortable he looks now with this team and being able to sell that fit? Because the one thing is, if it was Hendon Hooker back, at quarterback for Tennessee, that would worry me a little more. It's like Joe Milton, like all due respect to Joe Milton, but Notre Dame has the more accomplished quarterback right now than what Tennessee has. And if you're talking about just showing that in a practice, I think that's a little bit of a sell. But if Notre Dame's able to land this one, Brian, I think it's going to be about two things. It's going to be about the relationships, which I've already hit on, and it's going to be about consistency, right? I don't know what Tennessee's pitch has been to him, but they've been like rumored to George McIntyre at times during this recruitment, right? Deuce Knight and Notre Dame, that's been the pair all along.
Right.
Like from the start, it's been Deuce.
There was that initial look of, okay, here's the kind of the top five. But once they kind of got on the road after that really early first time, Deuce became the guy. Well, I'll say this. From the moment this current staff was put together, Deuce has been the pick.
Yes.
So like there was a time when Tom Reese was still here, they were still evaluating the board as they should have been. And is there any interest from George McIntyre, Bryce Underwood, KJ Lacey, all Deuce Knight? You look at all those kids, Antoine Hill. It's a really good quarterback class.
Yes.
But from the moment Gino Guidugli got here, it was like,
that's
gotta get that kid from Mississippi, right?
Yep.
I mean, that's just how it's been, right? And now he's still recruiting other quarterbacks, which we'll talk about here in a second. But there's been no doubt Deuce is the guy. Now, if they don't get Deuce, it's a great quarterback class. There are other really good quarterbacks they could get, but there can be no. We can say, hey, look, they still got an excellent quarterback. But you can't say they got their number one choice because it's very clear that Deuce is their top pick at quarterback in this class. There's no doubt about it.
That is. I mean, I think that's said perfectly. But again, I think there's a lot of things that Notre Dame could sell here. It's going to be about being super consistent with that selling pitch. Because the one other thing that we've talked about in the past is, yes, he's from Lucedale, Mississippi, but his brother did go play at the University of Indiana as well. So it's not like his family is necessarily afraid to go up north into the Midwest. So different circumstances doesn't always mean that they take similar paths, but there's a lot of layers to this that say Deuce Knight would be a tremendous fit at Notre Dame. It's about selling that and making Deuce believe that ultimately. And I think Notre Dame has a chance, but this visit obviously is going to be very important for that fact.
Right. And his brother was Ty Freifogel, right? Correct? This is his brother?
Correct. Ty Freifogel. Yep.
I mean, Indiana and Ole Miss were the two best offers he had. That's the one. That's the one makes it a little bit different to your point. But he turned down Ole Miss to go to Indiana. I mean, to your point, he did turn down an SEC offer to go to Indiana. He just didn't turn down Tennessee and Josh Heupel and that kind of thing. It's going to be interesting. So we'll see. We'll see how it plays out. But very talented kid, and I think sometimes you have to wonder, can a Southern kid make that transition? Just like we've asked, can a Northern guy transition to playing down in Oxford, Mississippi? You know what I mean?
Is it a fit?
That was a concern that we had about Brian Kelly. I just didn't think Brian Kelly was going to fit really well in Louisiana. Seems like he's made a good adjustment, right? But I think Deuce has the tools and the personality to me to be that kind of guy that can make that transition, in my view. So I didn't mean to hit that up. I was trying to star a question and
Gotcha.
accidentally hit that. So apologies on that one.
You're good.
But yeah, so it's going to be big. Now there's going to be a lot of kids coming on campus these next few days, Ryan. We talked about Deuce Knight. Justin Thurman shows up in a couple days, right? He's going to be here on Saturday, right? You've talked a lot about him. He is definitely a kid that we view. If we had to pick a class, predict a class today, I think you and I both believe that Justin Thurman would be one of the guys on that list, correct? Now this weekend, Ryan, Notre Dame is having the barbecue, and the list has kind of slowly grown. And I'm looking at the list now, Ryan. I'm thinking this is a really impressive group of kids. So you're going to have as of right now, we anticipate 7 of the 2024 commits to be on campus. We also anticipate Davion Dixon to be on campus this weekend. So there'll be 8 total commits, 7 from there. And Ryan, honestly, if Notre Dame is going to land an elite 2025 recruiting class, building on 23 and 24, maybe even taking that next step, they're going to have to land a lot of the guys that are on campus this weekend. Right. And where I want to start with you is we're just going to kind of preview the weekend. I'm going to bring up some names of some kids and you talk about them and where things stand, because I know you've done a lot of preview stories. So we've talked about the commits, but a couple of the big names, some are big names, some are big literally. I want to start, though, with a couple skill players on offense.
Yep.
And that's Talon Taylor and Jerome Bettis Jr. So obviously – we know about Jerome Jr. and that backstory. I don't need to let us spend a lot of time there. I still am waiting to see his junior film, just for me. Love what he did this summer. Sophomore film, just kind of okay. I'm really looking forward to seeing his junior film. But Talon Taylor, to me, Ryan, it's hard for me to envision Notre Dame having an elite offensive haul without Talon Taylor in the class. This is a big weekend, I would assume, for Notre Dame and Talon Taylor. Not that you're expecting anything to close quickly based on the article I read, but I got to feel like these are the opportunities that Notre Dame has to take advantage of, Ryan, to put themselves in position to where they eventually become to the team to beat for him.
I think so, because, I mean, as of right now, and I do have a piece, kind of to Brian's segue there of spoke to Talon's mother, Venus Taylor, who's a wonderful lady, and I got a little bit of a parent's perspective on the recruiting, which I think is a very
open and honest.
Yes,
like reading through that article, she's a very open. Hey, this is the deal. This is where it is. Very open and honest lady.
Well, she's a former college athlete and college coach, so it makes sense that she kind of has the recruiting perspective, which I think is wonderful.
Was she a softball player?
I believe she was a softball player.
Okay,
a very good one.
She tweets a lot about softball, so I had a feeling she had the softball background. Okay.
Someone told me, I haven't done any digging on it, but someone told me that she was an excellent college softball player. So yeah,
good to know.
So Talon Taylor, as of right now, everyone, we're of course talking about Geneva, Illinois, a star wide receiver. So he's right in Notre Dame's backyard, a kid that is very familiar with the program, has now been on campus 3 times will be on campus 3 times this offseason when he comes on Sunday. So multiple visits to campus this offseason, which I think is massive, right? Like this is a kid that is being recruited now by pretty much all the heavy hitters in college football. 6'1", 175 pounds, incredibly talented, twitched up, could play outside, could play inside. He could do pretty much anything you want on the offensive side of the football at wide receiver. Also a very dynamic punt returner for his school. Notre Dame has made a really good first impression, though. Really good early impression. Notre Dame is definitely one of the schools that are standing out as of now, but the Taylor family is fully on board with letting this process work itself out. There's not a imminent commitment date. I don't think that he pops this weekend if he has a tremendous day at Notre Dame. They want, and it's from his mother, right? So they've talked about this, that they want to take the official visits next offseason. They want to let this process play out. So nothing imminent, but the more times you get Talon Taylor on campus, the better sign that is, right? Keep getting him on campus. Keep getting those visits. He's an Illinois kid. We know that we judge recruiting by the actions and by the signs, right, Brian? And if he keeps coming to campus,
Right.
Obviously, there's interest there, right? The minute he stops is the minute that you start
100%.
saying,
Ryan,
that's a
I
little.
don't care if Talon Taylor wants to take his recruitment down to signing day. As long as he keeps coming to campus, I don't care. Like, you wait. You play it out. He's that good. And I don't care. It's the fact that he's from Illinois makes it even more important. But I don't care if he was from Phoenix, Seattle, Miami. He's that good. He's not important because he's from Chicago. The Chicago area, from Geneva, Illinois, right outside. It was like the western, out west of Chicago, but like 30 minutes from Chicago.
Yes.
That adds the importance of it. This is an elite player in your backyard, but this is a top 30 to 50 at worst caliber football player in the country, not receiver, overall player. You have to get more kids like that. You just need to continue getting more kids like that. So I don't care how long they want to take the process out. You let it play out. And as like you said, as long as he keeps coming to campus and you get these opportunities to remind him of how much you want him, you're important. Hey, I did figure it out. So here's the deal. She's currently the head coach at North Central, which is a Division III school in Illinois.
Yep.
This is
very
what
good football team North Central has, by the way.
Yes, that's absolutely right. Didn't they win a title? Or they played for a title recently. Yeah, they played for a title.
I forget if it was last year or the year before, but they were a dominant football team in the last couple of years.
They've been good for a long time. I know that they at least played for the national championship recently. I don't know if they won it.
They definitely won one because they were like 15-0 one season or something like that.
Okay, let me go, because it had to be recently. Last year. They're the defending champs. They won it last year. They beat Mount Union 28-21 in the championship game. So, and then I know they were in the finals one year recently as well. Yeah, 13-1 the year before. They beat Mount 2 years in a row. Interesting. Yeah, Mount's not what they used to be. And then Mary Hardin Baylor beat them the year before in the championship game. Yeah, 57-24, and then last year they got payback. They beat Mount again, and then they beat Mount again in the title, but they beat Mary Hardin Baylor in the semifinals 49-14.
North Central they had a running back that I think just graduated now who was just absurdly good for North Central, like absolutely absurd. They had like this white running back who was like 5'10", 210, and just like a bowling ball, number 8. Like, he was a really good football player.
Would that be Ethan Greenfield?
Ethan Greenfield, man, he was good football
1,997 yards, 26 touchdowns. Yeah, that's
it's not bad. And he was in a lot of blowouts too, so he would have went over 2K easy if
Yeah, he had over 100 yards in all the playoff games, so it's not bad. Not bad. All right, so I believe, does he play in the same league as Carthage? Because I actually interviewed for the OC job at Carthage back in my second year as a coach. But anyway, Venus Taylor, she's the head softball coach at North Central. This is what her bio says. She played collegiately at Western Illinois, where she earned Mid-Continent Conference, it's now the Summit League, Player of the Year, and was elected into the Western Illinois Hall of Fame in 2009. She finished her career with single-season records for hits, runs scored, stolen bases. Her 42 stolen bases in 1997 still ranks second in the Summit League's all-time single-season record book. And then she played 9 seasons of professional softball. So, and she was a 3-time All-Star and a 2-time world champion as a professional softball player.
So it's where Talon gets some of his athleticism, is what you're saying.
It's funny. We've had several Notre Dame commits in recent years that definitely got their athleticism from their mothers. Joe Otting is one, right? Yeah. Where it was actually the mom that was the athlete. So it's very interesting. Very interesting. But so that's Venus Taylor, just so people can have some context. Yeah, so that's where Talon gets his athleticism from. Well, I don't know who I'm not familiar with his father, but like, if it wouldn't surprise me if his dad was an athlete as well. So this is a very dynamic athlete, very explosive athlete. Notre Dame just needs to keep getting him on campus. I want to kind of stay on the offensive side of the ball, Ryan, because there's a chance that the majority of Notre Dame's offensive line class in 2023, in the 2025 class, is going to be on campus this weekend. There are 3 kids on campus this weekend that are very high on Notre Dame. I want to hear you talk about them, Ryan. Owen Strebig from Catholic Memorial in Wisconsin, Maddie Augustine from Brunswick School in Connecticut, and of course Rowan Byrne, who you had on the show recently from Iona Prep in New York. They are all slated to be on campus this weekend, and one of those, a little slight change of schedule in order to get back on campus this weekend.
Yeah, and obviously I'll start there. Rowan Byrne, who is a star offensive lineman out of Iona Prep in New York. I'll actually be at their first game of the year. They're playing New Jersey team this year. They're playing Bergen Catholic, so I'll be able to see him going against Quincy Porter, which will
So
be
he's going against
interesting.
dudes. I mean, he's going to
Yeah,
be going.
man.
I mean, okay, good.
They're calling it the border war. Yeah, so they get Bergen Catholic and Iona Prep get to play, so it'll be an interesting game. But Rowan Byrne, kind of the conversation that he had told me was he had spent multiple days on campus at Notre Dame. He had camped there this spring and this summer, excuse me. But one thing he had talked to me about was this coming into this month is he was going to go down to Texas A&M and he was going to go to Michigan because he couldn't make either games this season and he had never been down to an SEC school. So he was going to go check out Texas A&M because he already has plans. He's going to go to Ohio State, Notre Dame this season. He's going to go to Wisconsin, Ohio State as well. And right now he had told me that his top three schools are Wisconsin, Penn State, and Wisconsin, Michigan, and Notre Dame are the three schools. So he originally was not planning to go to this cookout because he was going to be in Michigan and he was going to go be down in Texas A&M. The plans have changed. He is still going to Michigan, but he is not going down to Texas A&M. It was never really a team that he was overly interested in. It was just more I've never experienced that. So I want to go down and check out an SEC school. Cancel that visit. He will be up at Notre Dame for the chill and grill barbecue or cookout, whatever you guys want to phrase it. And it's just it's a big one because as of right now, Rowan Byrne is not planning on committing anytime soon, but we know those things can change from time to time, depending on the player. So we shall see. He likes Notre Dame a lot. He is very high on Joe Rudolph. I mean, it is a seamless fit.
People who like to stalk kids on social media, Ryan, yes. Rowan Byrne has liked almost every story that I've tweeted about Notre Dame in the last week and a half.
He also has liked every one of that I'm putting out on recruits in the 2025 class as well. So it's yeah.
Let's talk about Maddie Augustine. We're going to end up with we're going to finish off with the only kid in the class who might have a chance to, by the time it's all said and done, make Charles Jagasol look small. So let's go to Maddie Augustine next. Very interesting backstory, Ryan. Former basketball player, actually went to Brunswick to play basketball, I believe. Converted to football recently. He's young for his was young for his grade. From what I understand. So he reclassified back a year. To kind of get more on a normal schedule. And obviously now that he's no longer a basketball player and he's a football player, he's going to need that time for transition. I think it was a smart move by him. Came to Notre Dame's camp, had never heard of him. By the end of the camp, he was not only offered, but shot up their list of players they like in this class and want in this class, Ryan. So this has been a very interesting but very fast courtship between Notre Dame and Maddie Augustine, whose offer list, by the way, since Notre Dame offered, has really blown up. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Well, funny enough, when he camped at Notre Dame, there were two Connecticut offensive linemen, him and Will Black, who had both been offered by Notre Dame after the event as well. So Maddie Augustine is your quintessential developmental offensive lineman with a really nice upside. He is 6'7", 260 pounds. This will be his second time now on campus, obviously after camping this offseason at Notre Dame. Again, feel great about where Notre Dame is because like you said, Brian, the minute they saw him in campus and the minute they gave him his offer, they made him a priority. Like that's just where it is, right? They made him feel like a priority. So getting him back on campus so quickly after having the offer, after seeing the campus, having it now more from a recruiting perspective than a player perspective, competing at a camp, I think is going to be a massive opportunity for Maddie Augustine. It's going to be a massive opportunity for the Notre Dame class. This is one where, again, you're battling the Wisconsins, the Penn States, but I mean, he's also getting courted by some other really good schools around the country as of right now. So Maddie Augustine, developmental offensive lineman that I think has a massive upside, and Notre Dame certainly likes him a high degree to get him back on campus. One of two really talented players from his high school as well, because Ethan Long is also from his high school as well. So,
I mean, you look at his offer list lately, Ryan. In the month of July, he's gotten offered from Miami, Florida, Tennessee, Texas A&M, Nebraska, and I believe Alabama just offered him
I believe
2 days ago. I believe. So he's blown up a lot, and I'm pretty sure Notre Dame is the one that started it. No, like, yeah, the only school, Indiana and Wisconsin, Kentucky was his Notre Dame, was his offer list, like Duke, BC, schools like that.
Yep.
Notre Dame offers him on the 3rd, and like a week later, Ohio State offers him. Then Michigan State offers him. Then Michigan offers him. Then Maryland. Then Penn State. So they offered him in early June. By the end of June, all the Midwestern schools had followed up with offers: Michigan, Ohio State, Michigan, Michigan State, Penn State. Then Nebraska. Then all the Southern schools start offering him. So yeah, his offer list is gone. He's like, Notre Dame offered who? To, have you seen this kid's offer list? Now, hasn't changed as a player one bit, but the perception now is that you see that offer list, but there's a reason why the offer list is blowing up. Not just because Notre Dame offered, but because people are getting to learn more about this kid and be like, hey, this kid's a bit of a project, but this is a really athletic, really talented project that said it 2021 class, Ryan. Give me a Joe Alt in every class. And I said that at the time. This is before, I mean, it's like, well, obviously. No, I'm talking when they got a commitment from Joe Alt and he wasn't ranked high, and none of us knew that he was going to be developing a top 10 NFL draft. Well, apparently some people think he's not even the best or second or third best tackle in his class.
Junior
whatevs.
Yeah.
But when you look at Joe Alt, you say, hey, look, this kid may never pan out, but I see length, I see athleticism, I see some power. Yeah, he's a bit projectable, but give me that kind of kid. And then the next year, that kid was Ashton Craig, who the staff is in love with right now. Then the next year, that kid is Joe Otting. And so to me, Ryan, give me a kid like that every year. And my version of that kid in 2025 is Matty Augustine. Right. He's that, this kid may not pan out. He's going to need a lot of work, but man, you take a flyer on that talent, that just God-given athleticism and length every time. You don't get 5 of him, but you get 1 of him a year. And that's my guy. That's my that project. But boy, that kid, that if he figures it out, this kid's got a chance to be really, really good. That's my Joe Alt, Ashton Craig type of kid for the 25 class.
Yep. No, I totally get that. I mean, it could have been Caleb Brewer this class as well, but you know, another conversation for another day. So you're correct.
You're never
gonna let
Caleb
down.
Brewer ends up being really good, I'm gonna have to institutionalize Ryan. That's just the reality of it. If he ends up being really good, I'm gonna get a call from Ryan's wife one day, and she's like, Brian, something's wrong with Ryan. I'm like, what's going on? She's like, he's just laying in the corner of his bedroom, sobbing and balled up in a like a little baby. What happened? I don't know. We were watching the NFL draft, and so picked Caleb Brewer in the first round, and he just lost it. I can't get him out of his room.
Caleb Brewer made an All-American list. Like, yeah, exactly. Oh man, I just like that kid so much. Yeah.
Yep. No doubt. Now, this is not a project. This is one of the best linemen in the country.
Yes. That is Owen Streebig.
Let's
go.
It,
out of Catholic Memorial up in the state of Wisconsin, same high school as Corey Smith, who is now committed to Penn State, who Notre Dame gave a long look to and liked in the 2024 class as well. This young man is listed right now, depending what site you're looking at, 6'7" or 6'8" and 290 plus pounds. That is a massive human being, folks. I want to reiterate this. 2025, which means he just finished up sophomore year of school. He's going to be a junior this year. He is going to go, if he chooses Notre Dame eventually, he's going to show up at 6'8", 300 plus pounds as a true freshman. It's going to happen. And Notre Dame is certainly high on Owen Streebig. And you know who else is also high on Notre Dame? Owen Streebig. Third trip this offseason to Notre Dame. Not third season overall, third trip overall, third this offseason. He will obviously be there at the barbecue. Has been multiple trips. I mean, Brian, I don't like throwing this out as much as, often, but Notre Dame seems like the team to beat for Owen Streebig right now. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of where you are. Like, again, he's being courted by some of the best offensive line producers in college football. The Michigans of the world, the Wisconsin, Stanford obviously had a little bit of their heyday in the earlier 2010s. Some of the best offensive line producers are coming after Owen, and for good reason. Really talented football player. This one, the timeline has been kind of set as far as like not rushing it and maybe wanting to wait until after junior year. But another one, like, what else do you have to see after a certain point, right? Like, what else do you have to see? So Notre Dame has a chance to continue to move the needle, continue to grab and hold the momentum on Owen Streebig for whenever he decides to make his official declaration. Notre Dame is the team to beat, in my opinion, for Owen Streetbig as of today.
Now, I want to say something because we haven't talked about him in a while, but the last time we talked about him, we said the city he's from incorrectly, and I wanted to make sure that we were good. It's Waukesha. I think I said Waukesha or something like that. I sounded it out, but it's Waukesha, Wisconsin, Catholic Memorial. We brought up one time, Ryan. I'm not sure if were you on the show with me when I put the Twitter picture he put up with him and Coach Freeman.
Yes, where he's just massively over
Marcus
him,
Freeman is a 6'1.5", he's a really good still in good shape. He was a 230-pound linebacker in college, and he looked like a little tiny person next to Owen Streetbig. Like that's a big boy. That's a massive young man. Yes. So, but he is a very highly ranked player. There's no doubt about it. And he brings sort of that typical recruiting profile that you assume of a Notre Dame offensive lineman, right? He's ranked number 40 nationally by On3, 78 by Rivals. The lowest he's ranked is 143 by 247. They tend to just have some very bizarre rankings. What's funny is the vaunted recruiting prediction machine for On3 has Wisconsin as the favorite by far for him. But I think you're correct, Ryan. I think Notre Dame is going to be very tough to beat for this young man. But got to close, right? And we've got to find out if Coach Rudolph can close on those big-time linemen that aren't from the state of Indiana. When you look at a couple other positions, Ryan, I want to highlight some of the bigger name guys on the board, or some of the more intriguing players and positions. There's a couple defensive linemen I want you to talk a little bit about, Ryan, that are going to be on campus this weekend. There's really three I want to dive into. First two are Christopher Burgess and Brandon Caesar. Brandon Caesar's from Ohio, Christopher Burgess from Chicago. And then also one of the more intriguing players in the class is Jarquez Carter. Now, obviously, Brian Smith has had a chance to talk to this young man, to see this young man, and he is not from a typical Notre Dame type of area, but seems to like Notre Dame a lot. So let's because there's a lot of defensive linemen going to be on campus this weekend. Obviously, Gabe Kaminsky, Israel Oladipupo, who's an in-state kid. You're going to have a story up on him later today or tomorrow. Lamari Carter Hall, Caden O'Rourke, Joseph Reif, who was recently offered by Notre Dame. Juju Marks are all guys going to be on campus. But I want to really highlight the three that we talked about, Ryan. Brandon Caesar, Christopher Burgess, and Jarquez Carter. Burgess and Caesar are making return trips to Notre Dame, I believe, whereas I think this is Jarquez Carter's first. So, Ryan, why don't you get everybody up to date on where those things stand?
Yeah, Jarquez Carter's been a guy that's talked to me a little bit about wanting to visit since he was offered a couple months ago and, just trying to make that happen. One person that I think is very instrumental in this one, Brian, from what I've talked to Jarquez, is Davion Dixon, is a person that he has a good relationship with and has been kind of pitching Notre Dame to him, right? And this is one where he has told me that Al Washington has been incredibly consistent with him, has talked to him when he obviously can. We're in a dead period right now, so there's a little bit of limit to communication.
And they're 25 kids, which also limits exactly.
Which is why for 2025 especially, it is so important to get them up for camp or get them on campus for a visit, because then obviously those things are to be maneuvered around, those kind of limitations. So Jarquez getting up, he's from Newberry, Florida. And like you said, Brian, it's not a typical Notre Dame area, but a really talented kid, man. This is a twitchy 3 technique. I mean, right now he's listed 6'2", 6'3", 275 pounds. He'll be 290-ish sometime pretty early on in his college career. But this kid can move. He's incredibly good one-gap penetrator. Really interesting football player that I'm very interested to see, because I think he likes Notre Dame a ton at this point. He listed them as a leader for him pretty recently. But he is also starting to get obviously more interest on the recruiting trail, and things are starting to blow up a little bit for him. So get him on campus, I think, is a massive opportunity for Notre Dame to get in while they were pretty early with their offers. They were one of his first big offers on the list. So getting him on campus is big. Like you said, Brandon Caesar, who is taking his second trip to Notre Dame this offseason. He's out of Cleveland Heights, Ohio. 6'4", 250, although he told me on the phone that he's 256 pounds at this point. So he's getting bigger and bigger, which makes me question, is he a kid that could eventually transition from a interior, from a strong side defensive end type of prospect to an interior player? Because he is also a very good wrestler, a state qualifier as a as a heavyweight there in the state of Ohio. So really impressive kid. Have talked to him and his coach because they're also Notre Dame's also recruiting Marquise Davis, who's out of Cleveland Heights, Ohio as well. Brandon is incredibly well-spoken, listens to his coach about everything. And I think that right now, Notre Dame has done a pretty good job there. He's very intrigued about what Notre Dame could potentially bring to the table. But I would say this about Brandon Caesar is he's a person that I expect to really let the process play out. And he wants to visit everywhere. He wants to go to every possible campus he can because he just likes to kind of absorb everything and really try to dive in to what the fit could potentially be and what each campus can bring and what's, student life and all those great points. So nice opportunity to get him back on campus. I don't anticipate that one being one that's going to be decided anytime soon. And then Christopher Burgess, Brian, I mean, again, it's sort of like the Taylor Taylor thing. Everybody's coming after Christopher Burgess. His offer list is insane, man. When you talk about all the SEC schools, all the Midwest schools, ACC schools, everyone's coming after Christopher Burgess. When Notre Dame offered him, his big offers were like Illinois and like a couple, mid-tier schools like that. Like good offers, but not Alabama, Georgia, like not those types, right? But third time he's been to Notre Dame this offseason, fourth time overall in his high school career. So again, man, keep getting him to campus. Keep getting him to campus. Yep. He's a really talented player. He's a player that Notre Dame likes a ton. Keep getting him to campus as this process plays out. The minute that he stops coming to campus regularly is the time that you start getting a little worried. But as of right now, Notre Dame has continued to recruit him to the points that he keeps coming. So keep getting guys like Christopher Burgess back.
Yes, absolutely. We're going to talk about one player, then the last position group. We're going to do secondary last. James Flanagan is expected to be on campus this weekend. That's another big one because I think now with Carter Nelson sort of out of the picture in the 24 class, I think that heats up now looking for a second 2025 offensive lineman. And I say second simply from a timeline standpoint. Obviously, James Flanagan right now is the guy that Notre Dame seems to be targeting very much, but it's gonna be there's Emmett Mosley who just seemed to want like no part of the family legacy, and then there's like Bryant Young and some of these other guys where it's like, okay, yeah, they clearly want to be on board. James Flanagan seems to be kind of in the middle. He's intrigued by following the family footsteps, but also is kind of saying, but I want to make sure that it's what I want. Yep. And he's very much open to some other schools. So this is, to me, I think, Ryan, this is going to be a big visit for him in Notre Dame. Am I right? And where do things stand with James and Notre Dame? Because I know you've had a couple stories on him, but especially recently, he's open. He's very open about this. He's going to do what is best for him, not following his dad's footsteps. That doesn't mean it's not, when I say that, it's not anti-following his dad's footsteps. I don't think he has any issue going to his dad's school. It's just about only if it's also what's best for him. Is that a fair read based on what because I'm just trying to go off of what you've told me and what things that I've read from the stories you've done at Irish Breakdown.
Yeah. No, I would say for me, James is very intrigued by Notre Dame. I think he likes Notre Dame a ton. But to your point, Brian, I think that there are other interests out there, right? And there are some pull to like, hey, there is a chance to also blaze your own trail if you feel like that is the best option for you on the table. I mean, right now, I would say Notre Dame and Wisconsin. And Wisconsin's obviously the in-state school because his father had played for Green Bay for a little while. So they had settled in Green Bay, Wisconsin. So I think that for James right now, I think those are the two biggest schools, the two biggest suitors for him. But again, there are people that keep coming after him, right? Like his offer list continues to expand. But right now, I think Notre Dame is in the top two for James Flanagan. It is, though, to your point about what's best for you in the long run. Because I don't think his dad is going to necessarily push him to go to Notre Dame if that's not what he wants to do. That's not what it seems as of right now. But he is and I know someone asked, like, how good is he? Like, very good. He's also a 177-foot discus thrower as a sophomore, and he's also an all-state hockey player. Like, he's a really talented athlete at the tight end position. Player Notre Dame obviously wants a ton, but I think that Notre Dame, Wisconsin are the top two schools for him right now. It's just going to be about Notre Dame selling that, like, hey, this isn't a legacy thing, right, brother? Like, we want you. We want you to play at our school. And that's what they've also done with Jerome Bettis Jr. this offseason as well, Brian. Just kind of make sure that he understands we're not recruiting you just because of who your dad is. We're recruiting you because we really think you're a good football player and you can be a big part of our program.
Right. Would you say, you said top 2, is there a second school that is it Wisconsin? Would you say?
Wisconsin,
Okay.
the in-state.
And
Yep.
he was just there recently, right? Again.
Yep. He's
And
been
now
there
he's
multiple times.
right.
It's the in-state school for him. So,
Right.
Yep.
Right. I'll say this, Ryan, if we could debate what position group has got the most impressive visitor list. We've talked about offensive line. That's a very impressive visitor list. The receiver, it's only 2, but it's an impressive visitor list. We talked about defensive line with the kids. It's a long, I mean, I don't know if there's a position on out there. There's right now, looking at this, of uncommitted kids, 7, 8, 10 defensive linemen slated to be on campus this weekend from the 25 and then 26 classes.
I was going to say you could even, because I have Dominic Kulak listed as a linebacker on the board.
So do I.
But like you could also list him as a Viper. You know what I mean?
Consider him a Viper. Yeah. I mean, when Notre Dame took him down there and started working him out at Viper in their camp, I was like, okay, yeah, this is where he should be. I counted him and 9, all but one of those kids are in the 25 class.
Yeah.
The other position group that has a chance to be in the conversation for most impressive group of players on campus is the secondary.
Yeah.
There is a very talented group of secondary players, Ryan, and I'd like for you to address kind of where things stand, the latest on these 4 kids. Ivan Taylor, who is a big-time safety from Florida, is making a return trip to Notre Dame. He camped at Notre Dame this summer and was outstanding. Jadon Blair. I mean, if you haven't seen his film, y'all check it out. He's really talented.
Yes.
And Ethan Long, from a teammate of Maddie Augustine, who also is making a return trip. And then Mark Zachary, who's an in-state kid that is a guy that I know, Ryan, is not the big name guy. At least last time I looked at his ranking, he wasn't really a highly ranked guy. I don't know if that's changed or not.
He's
but
a little
Notre Dame
now. Yeah.
He has been sneaky high on Notre Dame's board for a while. It's actually getting a little bit higher. I see 247 has him up to 117. He's now a consensus top 250 kid. So he's going up in the rankings, certainly. But this is a kid that Notre Dame has been sneaky in on for a long time. They like this kid in that class. So that's 3 really talented safeties and a in-state cornerback, Ryan, from Ben Davis in Indianapolis. Yep. What's the latest on those 3 kids? Where do things stand with Notre Dame to get? I mean, I think all 4 of these kids. Jadon Blair, is this his first visit?
This is his first visit to campus.
So other than Jadon, all these other kids are making return trips to Notre Dame, which is not something to is important context for these conversations. A lot of these kids actually are making return trips to Notre Dame. Yeah.
A lot of them are. You're absolutely correct. A lot of them are taking, even some of the kids that don't have offers are returning for the second time to Notre Dame after camping. So, I mean, Mark Zachary, I think, was a great place to start. Ben Davis, like you said, in-state program, obviously. Really good football and basketball player for Ben Davis. Just kind of has that natural athleticism, a kid that Notre Dame's high on. Return visit this offseason. Again, anytime you get an in-state kid that knows your program back on campus, I think that's a tremendous sign. Get them there as often as possible. Ethan Long is the teammate of Maddie Augustine, the 2025 offensive lineman that we've talked about. Ethan's high on Notre Dame, Brian. He was another kid that camped there this offseason, got his offer, has now been to campus multiple times this offseason. He's one of those guys that has a lot of length to him, 6'2", with pretty long arms. That Notre Dame has used the Kyle Hamilton pitch to a lot of these guys, and for very good reason. I would make the same one to these longer safeties. I would 100%.
No one actually had to force the Kyle Hamilton comparison on Jadon Blair. I'll just say that.
No, they didn't. They certainly didn't.
That just is natural, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But Ethan Long is another long athletic safety that Notre Dame likes, and getting him back for a return visit, a Connecticut kid. Again, Notre Dame's in a great position there. Jadon Blair is a really interesting one, and one that I am curious to see how this one goes, Brian, because this is one of those kids, and you hear me say this all the time, there's a lot of kids that are intrigued by Notre Dame, but how interested are they really at the end of the day? And I think Jadon Blair likes Notre Dame. They sell the Kyle Hamilton pitch to him all the time because he's a 6'4", 180-plus pound safety right now as a kid entering his junior year. And he also told me in a recent interview that he's also going to be playing offensive side of the football. And he kind of joked with me, Brian. He's like, these recruiting services are going to have to list me as an athlete soon. You're not just going to be able to list me as a safety anymore after they see me at wide receiver. So really talented, good ball skills, great movement skills. Likes Notre Dame, but are they going to be in it is a great question. I'm interested to see the impact that they can have on him because I think he likes them. but does he love them? Is it a school that he can really see himself at?
Right.
It going up to South Bend, Indiana, him being a North Carolina kid. But
I,
Notre Dame's had a lot of success in North Carolina over the last couple of cycles, so
yes.
hoping to continue that
Yes.
one, obviously.
Especially in the 24 class. I mean, that's not going to be something to sniff at, especially with a kid like Mark Gilbert, Mark Gilbert, that's his dad, Micah Gilbert, who's from a pretty good school. I mean, him and Bryce Young are from really good programs in the state. And you're going to see, obviously, Jadon Blair's highlights as we're talking. I'm going to put Ethan Long up next. But the thing about it is, Ryan, I would argue that kids like this, from what I've read from you, what you and I have talked about with Jadon Blair, if you're going to have a shot at him, this visit has to go really well. And this reminds me a lot of when the kid that was at Penn State, Jason Owe, visited Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Liked Notre Dame coming in. There just was kind of like he liked them. I wasn't sure if he loved them. He made a summer visit, and just Notre Dame was never in it really after that. Not seriously after that. For whatever reason, it just didn't click for him in that class. And now you look at Jadon Blair, and I really feel like this visit is going to be big for Notre Dame. If you're going to be in this ball game, you've got to do well in this trip. I really think that's true for Jadon Blair.
Because there might not be a return visit if you don't do well, to your point.
Exactly right.
A lot of suitors for Blair, there's no doubt. But he's a really impressive safety. He fits the mold of what Notre Dame has had pretty recently with the Kyle Hamilton. I mean, he looks like a younger Kyle on this film a little bit. I mean, he's super long, man. Super long, explosive. Going to be a multi-side athlete this year to be able to affect both sides of the football. So I like Jadon. I think Notre Dame's in a solid early spot, but can it move to a new level is the question, which we'll have answered soon. Return visit, Brian, which doesn't happen too often for a kid that just finished up sophomore year, goes to Winter Garden, Florida.
Yes.
Ivan Taylor, who camped at Notre Dame this offseason. He's very highly ranked. I think he's ranked in the top 30 overall recruits by 2 services so far.
Yes. I'm going to look that up, Ryan. I believe you're correct on that.
A little bit of a lighter built right now. It's like 5'11", 6 foot, 170 pounds.
I believe he's grown, actually. I was talking to Smitty, and Smitty saw him at a camp this summer, and he thinks he's actually grown about an inch already.
Good.
He said he was actually standing next to Colin Hurley, who's listed on 6'1", and he sent me the picture, and Ivan looks at least as tall as Colin Hurley.
Good.
Now, it's hard to tell because they both have big hair, so it's kind of hard. But like you just kind of look at the nose, and like the nose seems to be just, right on the same spot. But you are correct. He's a top 40 player by 2 services. 247 has him number 39, and ESPN has him 32. So he's in the 30s of 2, which is very good.
And he's very intriguing football player because I think he's one of those safeties that can also play nickel if you need it to. I mean, he's got that short area explosiveness and quickness, which I think is extremely
He's got some Thomas Harper to his game, Ryan. I think that's a really good, astute observation right there. He definitely has some Thomas Harper to his game.
Yeah,
you are correct.
Like Jadon Blair, he could play in slot against like a tight end occasionally and do all that type of stuff, but he's a depth player, right? Ivan Taylor is a guy that I can kind of use all over the place a little bit. Been to Notre Dame now twice on his own dime, and that matters to me, right? Like that very much matters before his junior year has even started. So another player that Notre Dame is in a good spot with early. You're going to have to fend off some of the SEC schools. Obviously, they're going to be coming after Ivan Taylor, but clearly, we speak to the actions here. We watch the actions more than the words. Ivan Taylor's coming back to Notre Dame for a second time this offseason. If that doesn't show you that there's a high level of interest, I don't know what will. I mean, guys coming back. He has been on campus. He will be on campus more times than some local kids at this point. Like he'll be on campus more times on Sunday than like Nate Marshall has been, an Illinois kid. I mean, that's kind of a telling sign, right? So I think Notre Dame has a shot here to be. I mean, they're already in the game, but I think they have a chance to potentially separate themselves in the top of his group because they are obviously a team that he is very high on. I've also had a piece recently on him, just kind of giving a little bit of a preview of the visit coming up here. You're
still talking about Ivan Taylor, correct, Ryan?
Correct. Yep.
I mean, look, whenever a kid from where he's from, and I don't mean like a rough area, I just mean like Florida, who's as ranked as high as he is and had the offers that he already had, when that kid comes to camp to work out in front of the staff, that tells you something. And then, because that's on his own dime, and then a month and a half later, is already coming back for a second visit. That's impactful to me.
Absolutely.
But this is like the last time was more of a camp. I mean, you did your little recruiting thing and all that for like a couple hours, but it wasn't like this is the first true recruiting visit that he's going to be on with Notre Dame. And so it adds a little bit more importance, I think, than the camp one. But I do think that camp aspect of it to me was really important. Ethan Long's another interesting kid, Ryan, because he is not, I believe, as highly ranked as the others. And I just kind of wanted to get your thoughts on him a little bit, as I'm going to pull his film up. But this is another interesting one where Notre Dame liked him. They actually offered him before he camped at Notre Dame, I believe, right? Then they offered him before, and then he came and camped.
Yep.
And they liked what they saw. Only Rivals has even graded him, and they actually gave him
I was
a
about to say
4-star
he's
grade.
unranked by most recruiter.
But they did give him a 4-star ranking, and so I give him that. But I actually like this kid, Ryan, and I wanted to get your thoughts on him as I pull his film up of what you think of him as a player, and like, is he the kind of kid? I'm curious if he's the kind of kid, Ryan, that you could see maybe. He doesn't seem to be in a rush to make a decision, but do you think he could be one of those kids that maybe makes a surprise early decision, whether it's in Notre Dame or somebody else?
I think so. I really do. Because again, this is a young man where I think that Notre Dame is probably the leader for him right now. Like, I would kind of coin it that way. I mean, they are in a tremendous position with an Ethan Long, and every time I talk to him, man, he just speaks praises of this coaching staff and just kind of where they're heading with the safety position. And he talks about Kyle Hamilton a lot as well. Like Jadon Blair talked about a lot about Kyle Hamilton. I mean, this is a rangy, long kid. Again, we're talking about a 6'2" kid with long arms that can do a lot on the back end potentially. You see the reach that he has to break up passes. You see the ball skills he has. It's a good player, man. I mean, it really is. Like, there's a lot of length in this safety group in 2025, Brian. I mean, I know we're focusing on obviously the kids that are going to be at Notre Dame this weekend, but you throw in guys like Matai Tagovailoa out of Nevada, who's 6'4", 190 pounds. Like, there is some ridiculous amount of length, and obviously Ethan Long brings that to the table as well.
I would like to see him gain a little bit more speed moving forward, but he is very smooth. And my understanding is he actually ran a little better than expected at Notre Dame's camp. So I'm thinking that when we see his junior film, there is going to be a little bit more burst. But what you saw in the last two plays is what I like about this kid, because he's a little on the small, like I shouldn't say small, thin side.
Yeah.
But he will hit. He is a tackler. I mean, he is a kid he is a good tackler. I think competitive is a great way of putting it, Ryan. He is a kid that hunts for work as a safety. Very smooth and fluid. I actually think a top 250-ish caliber ranking is very fair for him. You know, if you even want him right outside of it, because I just want to see that burst and see him play a little bit more. But he's a kid that if the burst comes, his ceiling is going to jump up way higher than it is, because this kid plays with a relentless motor that you just don't see from a lot of young DBs. And that's something I love about him, on top of being really long and smooth.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many long and smooth guys on that 2025 board at safety. It's just it's ridiculous. I mean, that's one position that I'm looking forward to seeing how it finishes up for Notre Dame, or how it kind of comes together. Because I mean, I would look at that board right now, Brian, and it'd be like, you're in a pretty good spot with several of those kids. I mean, Tagovailoa has never been to campus, and he already lists Notre Dame as a top 3 school for him. Ethan Long, you're in a good spot with. Ivan Taylor, obviously, is a kid that's been on campus multiple times. Can you move the needle with Jadon Blair? You've gotten Jordan Young on campus before out of North Carolina as well. I mean, safety position is really, really talented in 2025, and he's obviously a part of that.
If Notre Dame finished with Taylor, Long, and Blair as their 3-man class, what would you think of that?
That's incredible. That's fantastic.
Just wanted to make sure we were on the same page. Yeah.
I mean, you have all different styles there too, right? You have 2 longer guys,
I think that's 2 top 100 guys for me, Ryan. Yeah. Do you agree with that?
Well,
I think Blair's a borderline top 100 guy for me, for sure.
I think the great thing is that you can play all 3 of those together on the field at the same time too, which is like a fit thing, right? Because I could just go like, Ivan, you're going to play some slot today, brother. Like, get out there, play some nickel, and the other 2 guys are your 2 starting safeties if they develop properly. You know what I mean? Like, that's just kind of.
I think you could put Ethan Long at nickel with help over the top if you're playing a team that's a really perimeter run, perimeter screen oriented. You know what I mean, Ryan? Like North Carolina, with as much as they do perimeter under Longo, as much as they hit the quick stuff on the perimeter, you may even want more of a come up and blow up a screen, the way Clemson played last year. So,
Yep.
and then you maybe have your cover guy like Ivan Taylor deeper just to protect over top. Depending on who you play,
Yeah.
I think he could even do some of that. Jadon Blair obviously is a third level player, and if he's coming up, it's because he's a rover. But I don't think he's got the frame to be like Tagoa, who to me, he's gonna be a rover when it's all said and done. Like
Possible.
6'4" rover. Blair is just a long safety, in my opinion.
Yeah. Very long safety.
Last guy, Ryan, I want to talk about, and we're still trying to learn a lot more about this young man. We do know that Notre Dame likes him a lot, and that is Mark Zachary, the cornerback. The cornerback board is still very much a work in progress as far as prioritizing who the staff likes the most. But this is a kid the staff has been on for some time.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I mean, obviously we know that Notre Dame is very high on this young man. I know that for Ben Davis, he is not only a notable football player, but he's also a notable basketball player. Mm-hmm. So I think that natural athleticism comes out on film a lot. Not the biggest kid in the world. I would say he's probably about 5'11"-ish, 180 pounds right now, 175 pounds right now. But there are some natural ball skills, and I think he's a really fluid athlete for his position as well. So multi-sport athlete for Ben Davis and an in-state player that Notre Dame obviously likes. So getting him back for another visit this offseason is a nice step, obviously, and a player that Notre Dame, I would imagine, is going to make a nice little push for.
He has a very impressive offer list.
Yes, he does.
Very impressive offer list.
Another one of those kids that has camped a lot and has earned a lot of his offers, which has been good to see as well.
Yeah, very impressive offer list. I'm going to actually try to get down and see him at some point in time this year. I'm not sure if it's going to happen because Fridays can be a little bit crazy sometimes, but I really want to see this guy in person for sure because I just want to see him size-wise. You know, what kind of size is he really? But he seems to have a lot of the demeanor that Notre Dame looks for. This was the stuff that intrigued me right here, Ryan, is actually some of the stuff of him. Yeah, some of the stuff, the few clips we have of him on offense is actually some like this clip right here. He stops and starts 3 or 4 times. There's a couple times you're like, does he really have the movement skills? And, sometimes he looks a little tight. And then you see other plays where you're like, oh, wow, that caught my eye. So that's another reason I want to see him. But he's a very intriguing kid. There's no doubt about that. So, Ryan, anybody else? I think we kind of covered everybody, right? I know Gabe Kaminsky's coming in. I'm very curious to see what the interest level is on both sides on that one. Joseph Reif is a kid that Notre Dame said offered recently. So you've got some intriguing players coming in. Do you think that Daniel Anderson, so running back I know Notre Dame likes from Bryant, he's another kid that's going to be back on campus? We broke him down recently when we did our running back show, so y'all should be familiar with him. And then, of course, continue that relationship with some of the commits. So obviously Bodie Cahoon is going to be back on campus this weekend. That'll be good to see. Ryan, do you think there's a chance, and we won't ask you to say who because that's kind of not what we do here. Do you think there's a chance that Notre Dame could get some players from this list soon to commit?
Yeah, I mean, it's very possible. I would say real quick before that too, Brian, I'm actually interested to see one kid that's on campus that doesn't have an offer, and that's Juju Marks, who's out of
the D tackle.
He's out of St. Thomas Aquinas, not the Florida St. Thomas Aquinas, but he is
still Kansas.
Yes, the Kansas St. Thomas Aquinas, but he is listed 6'7", 260 pounds, and he has an impressive offer list. He just got an offer from TCU today. I think he's up to 21 offers at this point. So a kid that I am interested to see if he leaves with an offer this weekend, depending on how that goes, and they're able to size him up and see him for the first time in person. So just keep an eye on Juju Marks. To your question, I do believe that, and I said this on a show, not talking about the immediacy of announcing offers, announcing commitments or commitments necessarily on this visit, but I could see a decent portion of this group eventually being a part of the Notre Dame class. So I think there's a couple kids that are in different spots with the recruitment. So to your question, is there a few kids that I could see potentially moving things up or making a decision this weekend or coming or sometime in the near future? I think it's possible. I really do. I do. I mean, I think that when I look at this list, I'm just like, from the Justin Thurmans of the world to the Jerome Bettis Juniors of the world to the Owen Strebigs, James Flanagan, like all these kids that have been on campus multiple times, I think that you could really start to accelerate some of these. So I'm not necessarily putting anybody on commit watch this for this particular visit, but out of this list of players, I would not be surprised if sometime in the near future or down the road, that multiple players that are going to be on campus this weekend aren't a part of the 2025 class for Notre Dame.
Yeah. I won't be surprised if somebody pops this weekend. Now, normally kids commit, they don't do it publicly right away because they get the cards and the graphics and all that other kind of stuff. But I'll be so I won't say that I'll be surprised if someone doesn't commit, because I don't know that the staff is necessarily in pushing kids to commit definitely mode, but it wouldn't shock me if they got some kids. And then, of course, the dominoes start to fall, right? Like there's some offensive linemen that like Notre Dame a ton that want to carry the process out, but then a kid or two commits and you're like, I can't carry the process out. If this is where I want to be, I got to make my decision, right? So I could see some things like that, but I don't think it's going to be a giant list that does it right away. But like you said, there's a lot of kids that are going to be on campus this weekend that I will be surprised if. I'm just thinking about now, and I won't say who, but if I were to look at this list, if I had to predict a Notre Dame class from 25 right now, I would definitely predict 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, at least 6 guys that are going to be on campus this weekend. At least 6 guys from this class, from this visit group, will be in this class. At least 6, and that's trying to be a little bit conservative. Right now,
I know. I think I said like 7 to 8 on the message board a couple of weeks ago, but I mean, man, they're in a good spot with a lot of these kids. It's just about seeing when the process figures itself out and when you're able to close it. But I think that you could see a large portion of this visitor list end up a part of Notre Dame's 2025 class potentially.
So, Ryan, that's going to do it for the recruiting part of the show. We're going to have a quick mailbag next. We've got, it may not be that quick. We have a lot of questions we're going to get to, but we're going to dive right into those mailbag questions next. But before we get there, do us a favor, folks. If you didn't listen to Ryan last time, do it now. We would appreciate if you would do it now. Hit that like button, hit the subscribe to our channel, hit the notification bell, share this podcast. If you've not subscribed to our channel or the CFB Nation channel on the podcast platforms, please do that as well. Right now, you can only get the CFB Nation shows on the CFB Nation channel at this point in time. So CFB All-America crew had a 2-part breakdown of the Big Ten, kind of a Big Ten preview today on CFB All-America show on CFB Nation. Obviously, all of Lucky Lefties content can still be found on CFB Nation as well on the podcast platform. So definitely going to want to check those out. On top of course, subscribing to Irish Breakdown and giving both of those platforms a 5-star review. We would greatly appreciate that as well. So, Ryan, let's dive into the mailbag. We actually have to start off with a few super chats. So we'll get to those, and then we'll get into the rest of the mailbag questions.
From Mark 1. Mark, thank you so much for the super chat. Thanks for all you guys do. Really gives us all the insight on what's happening with our Notre Dame team analyst. Thank you, sir.
I appreciate that, Mark. I do very much.
Very nice.
Hopefully, we kind of keep you guys informed.
We had another one from Mark who also said, and thank you again, Mark, for the multiple super chats. Very much appreciated. Just a comment. If you guys would have 3 screens while you're talking about these players so we could see their pictures from position.
I'm not sure I quite understand that last part, Mark.
I think he's saying when we talk about a player, if we could pull up like their profile or something so they know who player we're talking about, maybe, or maybe a scroll at the bottom. I don't know. But yeah. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it just depends. When we do recruiting shows, we'll do some things like that. We're working on some different graphic ideas, but we'll pull film up when we can. But I'll take that into consideration, Mark. I appreciate it.
From Nikki D21. Thank you so much, Nikki. Hi, Brian. Love the show. I emailed you an epic, all caps, t-shirt idea.
I'm not sure what to make of it, Ryan. I think it's a picture of me with the beard and the hat on, pushing my glasses up, because I'm always pushing my glasses up. I think that's what the photo idea, the t-shirt idea. And I was like, I don't know how I feel about that.
I love it.
But it was actually it was pretty well done. Nicky is an artistic guy. There's no doubt about that. Very artistic fellow.
So I appreciate that. Is it going to be in the merch store sometime soon?
I'm not sure about that. I've never been a big fan of the idea of putting my face on anything. But they had another super chat as well. But I thought I emailed you back, Nicky, because I was trying to ask a follow-up question to your shirt idea, but perhaps it didn't go through.
We had a nice super chat here from Brandon Plensner. Brandon, thank you so much. Brian Driscoll, have you watched film on the other 2025 quarterbacks I brought up on the board that I'd like to see Notre Dame look at if they miss out on Deuce Knight? Hassan Longstreet, Malik Washington, Achilles Smith Jr., Wyatt Becker, Alex Mansky, or Dash by Early. Well, that's a great name. Dash by Early. Wow.
Ryan, have you seen those kids? I haven't watched any of those kids just yet. I will eventually get into some of the other quarterbacks on the board once we know where Deuce is going. But the only other quarterback that I've watched so far in the 25 class that's I've watched the Carter Smith kid from Florida. Yeah. And I've watched Bear Bachmeier. Those are the only other 25 kids that I've watched.
I have watched out of that group. I watched Hassan Longstreet and I watched Achilles Smith Jr. just because it's Achilles Smith Jr.
Right.
So Achilles Smith Jr.
Is he anything like his dad?
See, the only Achilles Smith that I really remember was the really bad Bengals version.
Okay,
of
so you don't remember the Oregon version? Okay.
I don't remember the Oregon version too well.
He was overdrafted, but he was a pretty good player in college.
Yeah. I mean, his son is 6'5" and long, and he's got a pretty strong
different
arm,
than his dad.
so.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, he's really tall. He's like 6'5". He's a legit 6'4.5", 6'5" right now. Yeah. As a kid that's going to be entering his junior year. Hassan Longstreet's a little bit of a smaller guy comparative to that, but he's smooth. He's a really smooth customer. Kind of like Longstreet. He's one of the guys I've watched. I've not watched Malik Washington. I've heard he's incredibly athletic, but I have not seen him, and I'm not really familiar with Dash or Wyatt Becker at this point.
Ryan, this 25 quarterback class is nuts.
Yes.
I mean, it is a really talented class. I've seen Bear Bachmeier. Somebody asked the other day if he compares, and I wanted to ask you this, how he compares to Tyler Buckner. And I said at the time, I'd need to watch him a little bit more to really study him. I just think in high school, the high school version, I just think they're a little different. Yeah. I think that Bear, to me, has a stronger arm than Tyler did at that age. I think he's a little bit, Tyler had really quick release but they're both athletic. Where I said they have a very similar body. They're built very similar. Bear can run. He's not a runner. Tyler was a runner. I mean, Tyler was a 1,600-yard rusher as a junior. Bear's more of a scrambler, is probably the way that I would want to say it, where Tyler was a runner. But there's some similarities there. I wouldn't necessarily call them too similar. And in my opinion.
Bear's arm strength on the run is legit, man.
Well, and how he runs, Ryan, he earns his nickname when he runs around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, man. That one throw he had, though, where he was rolling to his left and he banged that. It was something out breaking. I think it may have been just a scramble drill, and he threw it to the sideline. I was like, that is a big boy throw, man. Yeah. Like, that's not an easy throw. That's hard.
There's a couple on his highlight film where he climbs the pocket and just lets loose with a rope over the middle on a seam. And one was a seam, one was an over-the-top post. And you're like, I just have what I have a hard time with, Ryan? The 47.
That's awesome.
It's
man.
Just like,
well, it's because he played linebacker and running back his whole life, and quarterback's still kind of a new position to him. So I mean, he just stuck with the 47, man. He just stuck with it.
That would make sense. Him not being not the 47 part, but him being new to quarterback. He's more of a gamer right now. Like he's not a kid that you look at and be like, oh, this kid's played gone to a million camps. This is just a kid that grew up playing in his backyard, and he's just now part of the team situation.
He would drive me crazy if I was a defensive coordinator, man, because he would just make so much magic out of nothing. I'm just
making stuff up, Ryan. I mean, you watch him play, and
like accurate ball, man.
There's a play where he's like running, and the defense, and he just turns and like throws it backwards.
I know he did it twice.
And you're like, what the heck are you doing?
He did it twice, man.
It worked
twice.
It worked. So Tyler was more of a dynamic in structure guy.
Yeah.
In high school, because you can only compare them where they were in high school. It's unfair to compare, because I don't know if we've ever really seen the college version of Tyler Buckner of what he can be because of the injuries.
Right.
But yeah, it's going to be interesting. But I'll need to, Brandon. I'll get caught up on those guys at some point in time. I have not had a chance to watch those guys yet.
I still think it's so funny that you have two brothers named Bear and Tiger Bachmeier, and the oldest, his name is Hank.
I got to know if Hank's name is actually Hank. You know what I mean? Like I could see a scenario like maybe that's his middle name.
I'm gonna look that up.
Yeah. So I'd be very curious about that one, Ryan. Hank very curious about that one.
Yeah.
But and I'll tell you what, he had and you know what's funny is, you know what their parents' names are?
No.
Michael and April.
Nice.
It's very normal, names and
I do think that there's I think that they're part Native American, so that's where like the tiger and the bear came from or whatever. Mm-hmm. But where did Hank come from? That's where I'm really trying to figure out. I'm trying to see if he has anything. I just see Hank though. I don't see any.
Yeah, it just says Hank here. It doesn't say anything like about anything else, but yeah.
He's also at Louisiana Tech now. He transferred there this
Okay.
offseason. So
Yeah, I think one of his first games of his career, he led Boise to a win over Florida State at Florida State. You remember that?
yeah,
As a freshman,
he was a solid player before he started getting injured a lot.
He had
too,
a ton of
and a lot
injuries, man. It just
yeah,
ton of injuries. Yeah, but I also like the fact it was pretty cool when Hank got offered, or when when Bear got offered, he put the thing up about his grandpa. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, that was a cool
really
story.
Cool. Yeah.
Oh, it's so funny. He I was actually talking to Bear about Hank, and he said that I was like, oh, how's he like in Louisiana? He's like, it's different.
Definitely different.
He said he ate some alligator or something like that one time. I was just like, this is
definitely
weird,
different.
Man.
Definitely different. Let's just say that Water Boy is an exaggeration, but not by as much as you think.
Right, exactly. From California to Boise, Idaho to Louisiana.
Yeah. No doubt.
Nikki D21, thank you again.
Yeah.
Oh wait.
So yeah,
yes.
I'll resend you the email, but it's not that it's not epic. It's just I'm not a big. It's like when I named Irish Breakdown, I didn't put my name into the title. I didn't put the name into the site. I didn't put the name into, you know what I mean? Like, and then putting my picture on a shirt, that's just not me. Like, that's just not my style. Like, I'm just not that kind of in your face with me. You know, I love me some me kind of guy. It's just not me. It's a really cool drawing. I mean, it is really cool. My wife might like it. I don't know. My mom might want to buy it, but it's a really cool idea. Just for me, it's because it's not really my face, right? It's like kind of like an outline, almost like I'm trying to think, like you see like the different podcast things of the podcast host. It's like the glasses and stuff are kind of like it's an outline of their face, but it's not like their face.
Yeah, no, I know what you're talking about. Yeah,
it's that kind of thing. It was really well done. It was very well done. It's just a lot of
like the PFF guys get stuff like that.
Yeah, it's just.
I remember Mike Renner had one where it's just kind of his outline and his hair type of thing. Yeah.
It's just not me. It's just, but I'll think about it. And it's really thoughtful, and that's the thing I appreciate, Nikki. I do appreciate it.
We had a question from Irish Gordian Knott, who said, out of the freshman class, who has the furthest to go developmental-wise before getting on the fields?
The whole freshman class?
Wow.
That's a good one.
Joe Wadding, because he's 260-something pounds,
yeah,
probably.
He needs the most work physically.
Yeah.
Yeah, who needs the most work fundamentally? And so pick Absher. Maybe would just because the kid needs to learn how to pass block. Never really learned pass block.
Yeah.
I don't think any of the defensive linemen are necessarily that far off. Of the skill players, it's Braylon James and Micah Bell need to go the furthest from a development standpoint, just from a technical standpoint. But the thing about those two guys is they're so explosive, they can still help you even when they don't know how to play per se. Look, if you go into next year and Braylon James is still way behind the other guys, and okay, fine. He knows how to run a go. He knows how to run a post. He knows how to run a hits. He knows how to run a cross. That's enough. Get him on the field, right? Maybe not so much as much this year, but there comes a point in time where it's like, this kid's just too good. And same with Micah Bell. It's like, look, I know he doesn't know what he's doing yet, but in this game with that really fast guy, we're just going to say, you go cover that guy in the slot. And that's just, run with him. Wherever he goes, you go. That's a bit simplistic, but you get the point, Ryan, right? Like, when guys can really, really run, they don't have to be refined technicians. Jaden Mickey needs to be fundamentally sound because he doesn't have the recovery speed that a Cam Hart has, or the recovery length that a Cam Hart has, or a Micah Bell or a Christian Gray has. They have to be fundamentally sound. Rico Flores has to be really fundamentally sound if he's going to be an impact player at Notre Dame. He can't just win on athleticism. Braylon can. Micah Bell can. Christian Gray can. Jaden Osbury can to a degree. So you can utilize them even if they don't necessarily have all the technical stuff figured out. But once that stuff comes, and obviously they're going to have a chance to be Ryan, I know the class didn't rank as high, and it has some fans down on the class because they obsess over where it was ranked, and it was ranked this. I'm sorry. There are not 5 recruiting classes in college football that I would trade for this class of freshmen. And just seeing them the last 2 days, And I know for you, seeing some of them up close and personal does nothing but confirm that for me. Like, I've seen a lot of really good players come through Notre Dame. I don't know that I've seen a class that has the combination of size and speed and explosiveness and balance that this class brings to the table. I mean, it is. You think about this. Your tight end is 262 pounds.
Nuts.
And your offensive line, because you could start this offensive line right now as far as a five-man group. It's Jagasol at 330 at left tackle. It'd be Christopher Tarrick at 316 at left
Something
guard.
like yeah.
It's Joe Otting at center, who's 265, 270. He's undersized. But you you have 314 Sam Pendleton at right guard, and you have 326 Sullivan Absher at right tackle. And 6'1", 198-pound Jeremiah Love at running back, with 6'1", 205 Jaden Greathouse at receiver, 6 foot 200-pound Rico Flores at X, and 6'2", 109. Actually, he's over 200 pounds now. Braylon James at X, or at boundary at X.
And Flanagan at 6'6",
yeah,
262.
262. And Kenny Minchie 6'2", 6'1 and a half, 219. Yep. This is a big group of kids. Right? Drake Bowen's 235. Jaden Osbury's 224. Preston Zinter's 233. Armel Mookum 6'3", 280. Brennan Vernon's 269, I think is what I saw. 6'5 plus 269. Devin Houston's over almost 300 pounds already. This is a size-wise one of the biggest freshman classes. Like you'd mentioned earlier about the O-line, it doesn't end there.
No.
But it's athletic. Yeah. So I know the people that obsess over rankings are not as high on this class as they should. Ryan, I'm sorry. I think this is a big-time gap-closing, needle-moving recruiting class, and we're going to find that out much sooner than people think, in my opinion.
I agree.
It's a really impressive group.
Next question is from Nick P. He says, will Chris Tyree get enough touches via offense and special team to win the Heisman?
No.
No.
No, I don't. I mean – I don't think Chris's impact is going to be like that kind of let's just take the Heisman part out because, I mean, the odds of that. But I don't think he's like a 1,000-yard receiver type of guy. I think he's more of a, if you think of a dream scenario, it's like 700 yards receiving on 30 catches and then another 300 yards on rushing on jets and reverses and things like that. And then maybe some yard, bunch of yards on returns. So you kind of that production I could definitely see, Ryan. Yeah. But as far as like to where he's getting to like 2,000 yards of offense, and I mean that he would need that to be in a Heisman conversation. He'd need to be like around 200 yards, and I'm talking return game, receiving, and rushing. He'd need to be like a 2,000 yard, 15 to 20 touchdown guy this year for a Notre Dame team that's undefeated.
Yeah.
And hope that Sam Hartman doesn't have 4,000 passing yards to take away all your attention and votes.
Well, I was going to say Heisman is a very quarterback-driven award anyway, right? Like not many wide receivers in general win the Heisman.
And when they do, we talked about this in the show last week, right? But his numbers were insane. He had like 110 plus catches. In 13 games. You just don't see that. You just don't see that at that position. You really don't.
I agree. We now have a question from Andrew Gilmore. It says, how is Marcus Freeman looking in terms of leadership in his second fall camp? Any notable differences between year one? What is the difference between Parker and Reese? Different temperament.
Way different temperament. Temperament. Not better, not worse, just very different. Tommy was a very intense guy. He coached like he played, guys with a lot of fire. That's just how he was. Coach Parker's a lot older, more experienced, a little bit more calm. Still loud and intense, but just a different style. Just different. As far as Coach Freeman's leadership, I mean, I really don't know. I mean, we've seen two camps. I'll say he's very engaged. He spends a lot more in teaching time this year, especially during the turnover circuit. A lot more teaching time. And we saw him today around the defense during the circuit. Yesterday, he was around the offense a lot, the defense a lot again yesterday too. I imagine it's going to kind of change up a little bit. He seems to be more comfortable in his own skin this year a little bit than last year from a leadership standpoint. I mean, we have not even come close to seeing enough of what goes on a day-to-day basis after two practices for me to be able to say it's any better. Or worse, or just to have any opinion on it whatsoever. We haven't seen enough. But I think he is a coach who has a much more confidence that what I'm doing is going to work. Or last year, it was like every coach, Ryan, has that notebook of what I would do as a head coach. And last year, Marcus Freeman implemented a lot of that. Some of it worked, some of it didn't. So I think there's a little bit more certainty of this is what it takes to be a head coach this year than last year, which is going to likely manifest itself in improved leadership. But I can't see that with what we've seen so far.
Exactly.
That's my only thing. We're going to see that, Andrew, and how this team goes about how it plays. It's not something I can observe, because you could see a coach that's super involved and engaged and giving great rah-rah speeches in practice, and he's not a leader of a program. He's just doing the head coachy thing, and it's going to be, we're going to see that on how his team plays, Ryan. That'll be the evidence of if Coach Freeman's an even better leader in year 2. It's because his team plays like a disciplined, fundamentally sound team that plays with a ton of fire and plays to its potential. That'll tell us that Coach Freeman has figured it out and he's ready to be the guy we all think and hope he can be at Notre Dame.
Especially trying to get that information in a 25-minute period of practice.
Yes.
Very
right.
nice.
It's Andrew, there's nothing wrong with your question.
That's a great question.
Right. It's
it's
a very great question. It's just, there's no way that I can actually see that from a practice, because the practice is just kind of like such a small glimpse of what we're seeing. Right. It's just such a little part. It's kind of like, I think of it like this, man. It's the best analogy I could give. Practice is like an iceberg that's floating out in the water. You see it, it's like, well, that's not that big, but then you look underneath the water and you're like, that sucker's huge. You're only just seeing a little small part of it, right? Like practice is that little small part of the iceberg that's sticking out of the water. And there's all that other stuff that we don't see on a day-to-day basis that is every bit as important. Practice is like, when it comes to leadership for a coach, Ryan, practice is like games are for a football team. We all focus on the games, but the reality is the game is a byproduct of a long journey of preparation that leads to those brief moments of performances on games. Same thing with a practice when it comes to leadership from a coach. It's a small byproduct of everything else that you're doing as a football coach. And, then it all leads to what we see on Saturday. Saturday will be the thing to how this team plays, not even wins and losses, just how this team plays. The consistency in which they go about their business, the discipline, the toughness, the passion, the fire, all those things that he wants more out of this program. If the team starts playing to the things he tells us he wants it to be, that's when you know he's leading this team. That's how you know. Because you could win a lot of games and you're just more talented than everybody else. It doesn't necessarily mean that he's leading them in any kind of phenomenal way. Lou Holtz's teams played like Lou Holtz wanted them to play when they were good. That's same with Urban Meyer, Nick Saban. It's to get them to play how you want to play the game, which is why Nick Saban is so focused on the process, not the result. It's the process.
Yep.
And I think Coach Freeman understands that. Now we're going to see how he can get it out of him.
We had a question from Mr. 2.0 says, how do you think Max Bulla's experience could affect linebacker play this fall? Everyone was quick to blame Al Golden last year and not point out James Laurinaitis' lack of coaching experience as a potential factor.
But my whole thing is that that's still on Al Golden. If you've got a guy that's never coached football before, why are you asking him to act like a veteran position coach like you are? That's still on Al Golden. I will never, ever blame a graduate assistant coach who's never coached football before. I don't care how good of a football player he was in the NFL or in college as the problem for it. Because here's the deal. He's the linebackers coach by his pay and by his title, as well as a defensive coordinator. And so your job is to make sure the linebackers are prepared to go play at a high level. They are, especially since they're so important to what he does schematically. So if your linebackers are not playing to the degree you need them to because of your GA, that's your fault.
Yeah.
You're the defensive coordinator. That's on you, right? Why are you asking him to do that? Right? You don't give him that room until he has earned it. And so like Mike Denbrock did that with Ryan Mahaffey. I think it's like in the NFL now, but he was a coordinator at Northern Iowa recently. But like he showed Mike Denbrock he had the chops, and then the more he showed, the more Mike Denbrock allowed him to kind of be leading the group while he was overdoing OC things. But you don't say, hey, hopefully it's going to work out. Good luck. And if it doesn't work out, I'm blaming you. Now to the first part of the question, Mr. 2.0, because it's the first part I like. The second part, I'm not going with you there. Like, I'm not blaming James Laurinaitis for that. That's on Al Golden. Same thing this year. If the linebacker play is not good, I'm not blaming Max Bulla. I'm blaming Al Golden. Having said that, I think the point of what you're getting at is valid, that you're actually going to have a position coach this year that's going into his fourth year of being part of a football program right. and coaching, and has spent the last 2 years learning from Nick Saban. It's pretty good, right? It's pretty good. So to me, yeah, that's going to be an asset to me. But I'll say this, Ryan, from the practice we saw today, Max Bulla and Al Golden were both very active in coach. I should have said this during the original thing, because I didn't talk about coaches today. Mm-hmm. But Al Golden and Max Bulla were both very engaged in the instruction of the linebackers today. So I'm hoping that Coach Golden kind of learned from that mistake, if that's in fact what happened, and make sure that Coach Bulla is ready to take charge of it before you turn it over to him. Right. So that was good to see.
Yeah,
that was very good to see.
I mean, he definitely deserves a lot of credit. If Notre Dame takes a massive step forward, I mean, what's the new denominator that you threw in there, right? Like, you threw in the different number, a different variable, and that would be
Max Bulla would deserve a lot of that credit, but also Al Golden will deserve some of that credit too, because you can't blame him for the failures of last year's GA and then not give him credit for. And I'm not saying you're doing this, Ryan. I'm just adding my additional point onto it. You can't then not give him credit when they play better, because the GA does a better job. That's also on you as the defensive coordinator as well. So I'll tell you, I'm excited to see the linebackers play this year, Ryan. I really am. I just have a feeling they're going to be a lot better this year. They need to be. Maybe that's just wishful thinking more than anything else, but they need to be. And look, Al Golden's a prideful dude. I mean, I don't know a football coach that's not prideful in that sense. Does anyone actually think that Al Golden watched last year's defense and was like, yo, this was phenomenal. Like, this is great. I want to do this again, Nick. Now, he probably thinks differently than fans do, as most coaches inside. But do you really think Al Golden's like, no, I just want to be as good as we were? Or do you think he wants to be even better? He wants to be even better. Right. And so he's going to make some changes along those lines as well. Now, they may not be the changes we all want as fans, but he's going to work to try to make it better. Will it work or not? I don't know. We'll see. I just have a feeling that it's going to be a lot better this year for a host of reasons.
Yep. Next question is from Nathan Milton. What's up, Nathan? Causing Harry Heastand to leave the first time or keeping Brian Van Gorder too long, which was the worst consequence of Brian Kelly? Oh, it's actually kind of interesting question.
I would say Brian Van Gorder.
Probably.
I don't know that he necessarily forced Harry Heastand to leave. I don't think they got along well, but they never got along very well. I don't know that I would say he forced or caused Harry Heastand to leave.
Certainly didn't help, though.
Definitely didn't help. I mean, he was a factor. If Harry Heastand liked the coach, he might have stayed, maybe. But I don't want to put everything on like, oh, Brian Kelly sucked. So the biggest mistake he made as a coach, in my opinion, was bringing Brian Van Gorder back after 2014. I think you missed a championship opportunity in 2015, Ryan. I do.
Yeah.
And I think you could put keeping Paul Longo around as long as he did as well hurt that, with all the issues, the health issues he was dealing with. He should have tapped out much sooner, like we see with Matt Baelish. You know what I mean? Like, you don't think you can do the job anymore, you got to tap out. And so to me, I still look back, and I was watching the Bama Clemson game recently, and I'm sitting there thinking, like, good Lord. If you put Notre Dame roster on that Bama coaching staff with Nick Saban, I think the result would have been exactly the same. Championship football team. I think that was such an incredibly talented football team. And recruiting rankings show it compared to Clemson. The NFL draft shows it. I mean, Notre Dame had more first, second, and third round picks on that played in those games. Now I'm talking about guys that played that season, not five-star recruit that didn't play as a freshman that eventually became a first-round pick. I'm talking about guys that played that were regular rotation players. Notre Dame had more first, second, and third-round picks than Clemson on that 2015 team. And I believe more first-round picks, because they had several first-round picks on that team. They had 3 on the offensive line alone. Yeah. Think about that offense in 2014, Ryan, or 2015. They had 4 first-round draft picks. 3 offensive linemen, Will Fuller. You had a second-round draft pick, a quarterback. You had a 3rd-round draft pick at running back, and he wasn't even the guy that finished, with all the, some of the records that Josh Adams had. And Steve Elmer would have been at least a day 3 pick if he would have stayed with football, because he was a true junior in 2015. So, and then, that team was loaded. Absolutely loaded. Yeah, 3 first-round picks on the O-line, right? You had McGlinchey, Stanley, Q. Yes, I'm correct on that. Yeah. 7th-round draft pick, a tight end. That team was loaded. That team was absolutely loaded. Oh, and by the way, you had Jalen Smith on the other side of the ball. And your entire defensive line in 2015 got drafted. Your entire starting defensive line except for Romeo Kwara got drafted. And he's been the best pro of all of them.
Yep.
Right? So I think I counted something like 19 guys on that team spent time in the NFL. Like guys that played, not backups, and the guys that played. It was like 19 or something absurd like that. Max Redfield should have been an NFL guy, but that's a different story for a different day.
It's called self-sabotage in that instance. Yeah. Salty Virginia Peanuts, Salty. Do players work out over the summer at home, or do they all remain at Notre Dame?
They do both.
Yeah.
So when the school year's out in May, they go home for a few weeks and then come back in June, early June, and then they stay through this year. This year they didn't get a whole lot of time home. Yeah. Normally they get an additional, like get like 2 weeks home at the end. But because Notre Dame has a week 0 game this year, Bama doesn't start till like next Thursday. They don't start practice until next Thursday, because Notre Dame doesn't start the season in week 1. They start the season in week 0. Week 1 is they're playing Tennessee State. So they're starting a little bit early. So it took away a little bit of summer break. So these players have spent way more time this offseason at Notre Dame than they do at home. So yes, good question.
Which is a positive usually for team bonding. So
agree.
Ty Smith, can you give me your top 5 teams that aren't top dogs in their conferences that you project to have a better season this year? Who is your dark horse in those conferences? We did something similar to this recently.
Yeah. So can you give me your top 5 teams that aren't top dogs in these conferences you project to be better, to have better seasons this year? Who is your dark horse in those conferences? Well, we did talk about dark horses, right, Ryan?
Yeah. We did that, yep.
I think Big Ten we said was Iowa. ACC was, who did I pick in the ACC as North Carolina was my pick in the ACC for a potential dark horse. SEC, my dark horse. I don't really have an SEC dark horse. I think Tennessee maybe, but is Tennessee really a dark horse? If they kind of sneak up and win, I don't consider them a dark horse. You know who could be a dark horse, Ryan, is the team that I think has the best quarterback running back duo in that league. And I'm going to let you pick to see. Bingo. Yep. Okay. Bingo.
I think Kentucky could be a little bit of a sneaky team too. After
especially they have a real quarterback. Year. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I say that? I'm sorry. That was mean. But because Liam Cohen, you're right, Ryan. I snarkily talked over you, but you are correct. Getting Liam Cohen back is big for Kentucky.
No doubt.
Because you know one thing they're going to do, right? They're going to be pretty good on defense.
Yep.
Right. That's just Mark Stoops, right?
Yep.
So. Are they good enough to win the East? I don't know about that. I'd like to see them try. Big 12, Texas Tech, I think, was my dark horse if I was going to pick one. Because, again, Oklahoma's not a dark horse. Texas is not a dark horse. TCU wouldn't be a dark horse. K-State could be one. That's actually one I like a lot. K-State could, but they're preseason
they just won
top
the conference,
25.
Though.
Yeah. But as far as like being a playoff caliber team, but that's a good point, Ryan. How much of a dark horse are they really from a conference championship standpoint? They literally won it last year. It's a good point. Very good point. And then Pac-12, who could be a dark horse in the Pac-12? Washington State, because I don't know if I consider Oregon State with the preseason top 25 ranking a dark horse.
And they just won 10 games last year, right?
So smacked Florida in the bowl game. I like the Washington State pick because I know you're really high on Cameron Ward. Most teams get transfers; they don't get them for a second year. They are. Yep. That's going to be impactful, in my opinion. Yep. Could be anyway. Could be impactful because he started to get better towards the end of the year. He started to get better.
That team wasn't very talented offensively last year, so I think a year or two under that, it'll be a little better. Yeah.
So 5 teams that aren't top dogs that could project to have better seasons. I'm trying to think who 8. So let's Big Ten. I think Wisconsin's going to have somewhat of a bounce back this year, Ryan. I don't think they're going to bounce back the way a lot of people think that they are. My dark horse is this in the Big Ten is the same as my team that's going to have a better season compared to last year. I just think Iowa won 8 games with one of the worst quarterbacks I've ever seen.
Yeah.
I think they're going to be a team that's going to be better than 8-5. But Wisconsin went 7-6 last year. They're going to be better than that. I think. I think they're going to be better than that. I don't know of anybody else in the Big Ten that I look at and say, "Ooh, they're going to be like." Is Illinois going to be better than 8-5 with all the losses they had? I don't think so. Is Minnesota going to be better than 9-4? No. Nebraska at 4-8 could be better, but I just need to see who they're going to have. I mean, I'm just not ready to jump on the Jeff Sims bandwagon yet. You know what I mean?
I still think they'll be better though. They'll be better.
5-7 better or 8-4 better. Nebraska's got. Here's the thing, Ryan. Nebraska's got players. Do they have win the Big Ten West players? Probably not, but I wouldn't necessarily count them out. But I just need to see him get put together first. I need to see it because it's like 2 years in a row. I kept waiting on Scott Frost to do it. So the question we have to ask ourselves is, we're going to find out this year if the problem is inherently Nebraska or if it was Scott Frost. I tend to think it was Scott Frost.
Same.
We're going to find that out with Matt Rule, right? Because I think you and I both agree Matt Rule's a much better college coach than he is an NFL coach. He's a good college football coach.
Yep.
And we're going to find that out this year. Anybody else so Pac-12? Do you see anybody that you just think it's just going to be a lot better than they were last year?
A lot better.
Dude, they had 5 teams that won 10 games last year in that conference. I think Arizona has a shot to be better, and like Arizona State, they're going to be better than they were last year. But 5-7 is better than they were. 4-8 is better than they were last year. They were pretty bad, and I don't know how much better they're going to be. Here's the problem with the teams here's the problem in that league. You had 6 really good teams, 4 really bad teams, and then kind of like 2 teams right in the middle in Washington State and Arizona.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like it's going to be hard for those teams at the bottom to get any better because the teams at the top, there's so many good ones, and you have to play everyone. You can't we got a break with our conference schedule this year like you could get in the Big Ten or the SEC. In the Pac-12, you still have to pretty much play almost everybody. Just the way that it is, right? So you look at those teams. Here's one, Ryan. I'll give you one. Arizona. I like their talent. They've got a lot of young talent. I thought Judd Fish did a really nice job with that football team last year. And to me, I look at Arizona like you do Washington State. Getting the second year out of the transfer quarterback should help them.
Yeah.
He'll know the talent better. But how much is it? 5-7 to 8-4, 7-5? That I don't know. But they'll be better. I just don't know how much better. And I don't see any of the teams at the top taking that big. You're now a playoff team jump. How much better can Washington get than 11-2? Right? That's pretty good. So, and then SEC. Anyone else that could be a lot better?
Vanderbilt. The fighting.
You think they're going to be in a bowl game this year? Really?
Maybe.
Because they only got to get one game better to be a bowl team. Yeah.
They went 5-7.
Well, we had actually a question about that, Ryan. We'll kind of address that as we're talking right here. But we had a question from Archer, and he said Vandy received the 4th most media votes to win the SEC, 5 total votes, tied with Tennessee. One question is why? Because media people are silly. There's no justification for picking them to win the SEC. None.
No.
But I'm curious to see how they're going to be because they did have some tough losses personnel-wise last year. But the quarterback left, but he was going to get beat out. He was already getting beat out by the other kid. AJ Swan had already kind of beat him out already, basically. Yep. So they lost some kids. I hope. Here's the thing. I hope Vanderbilt's better because I really like Clerkley, and a good friend of mine coaches on that staff, and I like what he's doing at that program with some of the coaching hires he's made. I have a lot of respect for Clerkley, just like I wanted Mike Elko to do well. I don't think Clerkley is as dynamic as Mike Elko, which is but as far as a coach, but I'd like to see him do well.
Lee and Elko both getting extensions recently, by the way, which is pretty crazy.
I know.
Yeah.
One earned it. The other, okay, sounds good. We'll see. A lot of people think Colorado's going to be a lot better this year. And I'm like,
a lot better than 1-11.
Sure. What? Exactly. 3-9. Is that really better? But a lot of people think that they can make a jump this year, and I think to me that has more to do with Dion Height than it does the roster. That roster is not getting fixed in one offseason, Ryan. I don't care who your head coach is. This isn't. And my comment is no kind of anti-Dion comment. I think no, I'm not an anti-Dion person. It's just I don't think people realize how bad that roster was.
Oh, it was terrible.
And Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders aren't miraculously making that a way better roster. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I'm not sold on Shedeur Sanders even being close to that guy, to be honest.
Same.
We'll see.
Same. Agree with you. So that'll be an interesting one, Ryan. But yeah, I saw a tweet about Vandy getting 5 picks. I'm like, come on, guys. Like, let's be serious. That's just silly.
Tyson is
that's the same one we just had.
Gotcha.
Sorry.
How do you guys feel about Ryan Day talking about they should change the schedule about Michigan possibly every other year? He shouldn't not play 2, possibly 3 times a year.
Talk about just totally tone deaf.
Yeah.
That's my big thing with Ryan Day. How about you actually, I don't know, not get your brains beat in by Michigan just this year and then talk about moving it? Like the optics of this comment, like here's the thing. There's validity to what he's saying.
Yeah.
There is. Number one, if Michigan and Ohio State are the dominant teams in the Big Ten, and there's a chance based on the way that you're going to pick your conference champions that they could play last week of the season and then again the next week. Yeah, I understand that there's validity to that. And not all rivalries play at the end of the year. Alabama and Auburn play at the end of the year, but there's no chance for a rematch in the past. Now that may change now, but a lot of rivalries, Ryan, play in the middle of the year. Texas, Oklahoma is sometimes late September. Always early October. Jacksonville, Florida, and Georgia never play at the end of the year, right? Notre Dame and USC only play at the end of the year every other year. I mean, there's plenty of rivalries that don't play in the last game of the year. There's also a lot that do, but it's kind of like you're disrespecting the rivalry the way you're saying it to me. It's just kind of like some things are bigger than whatever it is you're talking about. You know what I mean? But also the bigger thing for me is, even if you could make a case that they should move that, just the tone deafness of Ryan Day being the one to make that case is just like, dude, you're not winning points right now with anybody. Why are you even discussing this? Like, you know what? Look, I'm worried about this year's football team. I'm not worried about what the schedule is going to look like in 2024. I'm worried about this football team. Don't even engage that question, because like you just got embarrassed twice. This looks like you're kind of hiding or, sort of like, well, we shouldn't have to play late in the year or whatever the case. It just looks bad. It's just bad optics for me. Just don't address it. Like, what guys, here's what I know, fellas. This year's schedule, right, is the one that I know we're going to have. This is the one I'm worried about. And what I know right now is that the game this year is happening at the end of the year. That's what I know. I know that on November 25th, we got to go to Ann Arbor. And that's the only thing I'm worried about right now when it comes to Notre Dame and that team up north. Okay, cool. Right now, you can believe that they should move the game, but you have Gene Smith fight that fight. You know what I mean? Like, say to him, hey, Gene, here's why we should do this. And then let Gene Smith throw his weight around to get that move. It just looks petty. And it's such bad optics. And it's just like another Ryan Day starting to look a little Brian Kelly-ish to me, in that he just says and does things and things happen to his program. You're like, dude, that's just unnecessary. You know what I mean? Like, why are you engaging in that? I thought it was a bad look. Yes, that's a great way of putting it, Ryan. What are your thoughts on his comments on that, Ryan?
Well, I didn't hear the actual comment. I just saw in the chat that they're just talking about moving it when it is during the season.
Correct. It'd be like playing it like in the middle of the year or something. Like he doesn't want to have a chance of them playing back-to-back weeks, which again is what I said is that's fair. Yeah. If you're the two dominant teams and the way the conference championship is being changed is it's no like right now, if Ohio State beats Michigan, there's no chance, or vice versa, there's no chance they have a rematch the next week.
Right.
When they move to the new schedule and the way the Big Ten is now, there is a chance they could play each other. But it's just, that's my whole point, is that's not a fight you as the head coach who just got dominated 2 years in Ohio State need to be making right now. Right? Let Gene Smith fight that fight. Yeah. You actually go try to beat Ohio State right now. That's the key for you right now, is try to beat Ohio State. It's very bad optics. And just some of the people, we never said that they're saying they should remove the game. Never said that. But the game is always, for as long, my entire lifetime has been the last game of the regular season.
Right.
And, I would much rather make the case to get rid of the conference championship game than to move that game, in my opinion. That's my 2 cents. But it was moving it, Ryan. It wasn't moving it off the schedule, or maybe we shouldn't play every year. It was more of just, maybe we move it up a few weeks or move it to middle of the season, which, I mean, there are rivalries that play in the middle of the year. I mean, I just mentioned some. Alabama, Tennessee don't play early, or they don't play late in the end of the season. They play right in the middle. That's Alabama's number 2 rivalry, though. That's not their number 1 rivalry. Right. Michigan State play in the middle of the year, but man, it's just bad optics, just really bad optics, in my opinion, and just not the fight that he should be fighting, to me.
Yeah. Well, I agree with that. That's definitely not the conversation point I'd be having right now. But.
No. And if somebody asks, because you can't control what people ask you, but you can control whether they answered or not.
100%.
That's the thing with me. It's just, come on, dude. What are you doing?
We had a question from the world famous Scotty Notre. I haven't seen you in a while. During the Grill and Chill, do current team members and even alumni get to mix with the 2025 recruits? I also heard Jim Harbaugh offered to supply cheeseburgers.
That's a low blow. And I like it. I like it a lot. I would definitely not let Jim Harbaugh supply the cheeseburgers because I don't want to get put on probation. Or get suspended for games.
And,
but
they're probably unsanitary because you never know
100%.
Fingers been. So
you love talking about that. Players can, yes. Alums, I'm not sure how that works. To be honest with you,
I've never heard.
There's going to be at least
one of those.
I would imagine there's going to be at least 1-2 alums there, right?
Jerome Bettis, yeah.
And James Flanagan.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah,
if the dads come with them. So is Bryce Young coming this weekend? I think he's going to be on campus this weekend too. So maybe it might be 3 alums on campus this weekend because they're there with their kids, right? I believe Bryce Young's coming this weekend, isn't he? Let me see here. Where are the commits list?
Young on the list?
No, he's not on the list.
No.
He's not on the list. But I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if they can have alums there unless they're on campus for something else. But I remember there was one year where Jerome Bettis was on campus and he was around, but I think that's when he was a student. At Notre Dame. So it was a little bit of a different deal.
Right.
Not quite sure about that one. But yes, players will be around. Can be around because they can be around.
Next question is from Siggy13. With Colorado moving to the Big 12, do you think the conference movement snowballs fast? And if so, what do you see that coming next? I think 2 to 3 Pac teams move to the Big 12 by the end of the summer. Well, that'd be really quick.
Maybe. I mean, because they're going to have – it depends on when Colorado can move. That's the thing, right? Like Colorado's making moves now because of the state of their program. It would just depend. I mean, what could happen, Ryan, is Colorado moving ends up becoming the death knell for the Pac-12, which is it's coming. But this speeds the process up. Yep. Like the Pac-12's dying. It's not going to recover. It's got a terminal illness, in my opinion. And this kind of move could be something that expedites it a little bit. Who do you take with you if you're the Pac-12? If you're the Big 12? I mean, Colorado, Utah for sure. Do you go after the 2 Arizona schools? Do you try to beat the Big 10 to the punch with Oregon and Washington? I doubt that that's going to necessarily be effective, but do you try? For me, we've talked about this before, Ryan. If the Big 12 wants to expand, because they're at 14 right now, right? And then they're going to go back to 12 after this year when Texas and Oklahoma leave. They're at 14 right now, correct?
Yeah.
For 2023?
I believe so, yeah.
Then Texas and Oklahoma leave. So this gets you to 16. So now you're now you're with the Big 10 and the SEC now, correct? Aren't they also all at 16? So the Big 10 right now is at 14, right? Right now. And then when you get UCLA and USC, they're at 16. Am I correct on the numbers here? And then the SEC is at 14 right now, and then they're going to add Oklahoma and Texas, correct? I believe I'm right on that. And so let me just look here real quick at the Big 10. The Big 10, the Big 10 has 7 in each conference, so they'll be up to 16. Well, you lose Texas and Oklahoma, you're down to 12. And you're looking to add 4, so you're now the third sort of mega conference in that regard, although the ACC is not that far away. The ACC is at 14, right?
Yeah. Yep.
I think it makes a lot of sense to add Utah and Colorado, so you're getting those 2 pretty big TV markets in the mountain ranges, right? Salt Lake City and Denver, I believe, are both top 20 TV size markets. And then now you get the Phoenix, Tempe, Tucson, that kind of area. Those two, well, it's two areas. Tempe and Phoenix are close by, and then Tucson's far away. But you get the Phoenix area with the two, which is a growing. I mean, just look at census numbers. California's hemorrhaging citizens. A lot of them are going to Texas, but there's also a lot of them going to Colorado, a lot of them going to Utah. They're all moving east and south, right? Getting out of California. There's a lot of them going to Texas, a lot of them going to Arizona, a lot of them going to, I saw that when I lived in Colorado, right? A lot of California transplants when we moved to Colorado. Arizona's getting a bunch of them too. That's a growing market. And when we were out there, Mike, so I went to the Fiesta Bowl in 2015 and then again 2 years ago. And even then, you could just see the new neighborhoods popping up, in that area. It's a really growing area. So it may not be a giant TV market now, but it's going to keep getting bigger, in my opinion. Yeah. So those are the moves I think the Big 12 needs to make, to me, is Utah, Colorado, Arizona State. Not only are they good programs, but you're also getting the big TV markets, which is really what drives a lot of this. And the Big 12 needs some big TV markets. There's no LA market out there for them to get. But if they can get some of those, that mountain range and the Arizona ones, that could be a boost to their bargaining power when it comes to getting more TV dollars. What are your thoughts on that, Ryan?
So no Stanford is what you're saying?
No, I mean, I don't know that Stanford brings a lot of value. We've talked about that. Tends to upset some people when you say that Stanford doesn't bring a lot of value for the things that the current these deals matter. But the Big Ten supposedly wants Washington and Oregon. Maybe the Big 12 looks at adding those two teams or a couple. I don't know, but
Washington's an interesting one. I don't think I would like if I was the Big 12, I wouldn't waste my time on Oregon. I feel like that's kind of a dead fight, to be honest, as far as them versus the Big 10. But I would at least talk to Washington, maybe. I mean, that might be an interesting one. I don't know.
The interesting thing there, Ryan, is I don't know what the rules are in the state of Washington about whether or not Washington, and same with Oregon, can they even leave Oregon State and Washington State behind? That would be interesting. So to your point, would it make sense for Washington to then try to play that angle? So if the Big 12 to say, we're going to get to 16, so maybe they don't go for Arizona, or maybe they're going to say, we're going to go to 18, we're going to go big. So we're going to get Utah and Colorado, because that's obvious. We know they want them. We're going to get the two Arizona schools, but then we're going to go for the two Washington schools, because there's a couple big markets up there too. But what we're going to do that the Big Ten's not willing to do is we're going to also take Washington State and make it a twofer deal. In order to get Washington, you get to get Washington State. Because it varies state by state. It's just basically it's going to be written into certain bylaws of conference. There's some, I'm trying to remember where it is. I think it might be some of the ACC schools, like they can't leave without bringing other teams with them. Like they have to kind of be connected. I don't know what it is in Oregon and Washington. I'd be very curious to find that out. Like, can Washington even leave? Would it be a lawsuit? Could the Big 12 force their hand, or, who knows how it would be? Would the Big 10 be willing to suck it up and take Oregon State and Washington State and get into 20 in order to get Washington and Oregon? There's a lot of that stuff that it's a lot more complicated than I think some people think. It's just about adding two football teams to your conference. It's not quite that simple. Yeah. And we'll see what they're able to do. Like USC could just up and move because they're a private school. They can do whatever the heck they want. UCLA had to go through this process of getting, and there were people trying to fight that from happening. And of course, at the end of the day, the money won out. But who knows if that happens in Washington? I honestly don't know.
No idea.
I don't know.
We had Will C 2.0. Is Jadarian Price fully recovered? How is he looking?
And we talked about him a little yesterday and today. He looks great. I mean, we just got to see if he can stay healthy and stay fresh.
Yeah.
That's the thing. I mean, it's the big thing that I've talked about, Ryan, is with an Achilles, he may look great now, but it can fatigue a lot quicker. And then you lose that burst. We don't know if that's going to happen or not because we're not there yet. But he looks great, man. So far, right now, 2 practices in, he looks great. He looks really good.
Yeah. We had a question from Douglas Roundabouts.
There's a Douglas Road down. Like Douglas Road is a road right by our like near us, and it has roundabouts. Several roundabouts, and that's basically what that is. So,
Have you noticed any difference in the style message for quarterback coaching from Tommy Rees to Gino Guidugli?
Not really. Some different drills. We just haven't seen enough of that. I mean, he's not as loud as Coach Rees, just different kind of voice, but he also has a different role than Coach Rees did. That's going to factor into it as well. Coach Rees was the offensive coordinator. He had to be loud and talkative. I'll say this, he's very active. I mean, he's very involved in coaching and instruction and drills. It's hard for me to say specific. I mean, Tommy Rees was never going off on players on practices where we were there. I mean, it's just too early to tell, Ryan. I mean, those are big picture questions that you're going to need a lot more. You just got to see it a lot more, in my opinion, before we start making those kind of prognostications. I'll ask this one, Ryan, because I want to get your opinion on this. Can I ask this one? Because I want you to answer this one. This is from Gideon Rosa. If you had to comp for Taylor Taylor, if you had to make a comp for Taylor Taylor, who would it be?
I think it's one I said before, but he reminds me a lot of Garrett Wilson that played at Ohio State.
One in my head.
Now at New York Jets. I think that he's
that one.
Very interesting combination of explosiveness, change of direction, ability to play inside and outs. I mean, he does a little bit of everything, which I think he makes the game look very easy. And that's one thing that Garrett Wilson always did at Ohio State. And now with the New York Jets is he just made everything look very easy.
Great answer. Great answer. We have a super sticker from Richard Andrews. Richard, thank you very, very much for that. It's Charlie Weiss's last belt loop. Any speculation on Love being a punt return or kick return? Thanks, IB. We talked about this yesterday. He did return. He was one of 6 guys back there catching punts.
Nice.
And we have talked about him being a potential kick returner. So we have yet to see them take any kick return snaps yet. But as we said yesterday, he was one of 6 guys back there catching punts yesterday.
And he's got a little swagger and he wears number 12. I believe the Ricky Waters comps are going to be like unavoidable.
And rightfully so.
Yeah.
And I just hope he plays like Ricky did. That's my hope.
YouTube user said,
and that's salty Virginia peanuts, man.
Oh, it doesn't.
It just doesn't. It doesn't show up. Yeah,
No.
When he gave the super chat, it didn't show up that way.
Oh,
but yeah,
salty. My deepest apologies, man. Yeah. My deepest apologies, salty. Just love me some IB. Today is my eldest son's Brady's birthday. I'm telling him I gave him a gift to Irish Breakdown. I gave us a gift to Irish Breakdown.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
I appreciate
you're only going to give him a $20 gift, huh? Wow.
Maybe you don't tell him that because I don't want your kid to grow up hating Irish Breakdown. But
yeah.
Yeah. Well,
also don't tell him that you only gave $20 and that was for his gift.
Yeah.
Like that's
yeah. He might not like that. But we appreciate you, Salty. No doubt about it.
Salty Virginia YouTube user, someone said. Notre Dame 2164. What do you all think the chances of us being able to showcase all 5 of our great running backs in the same game? Maybe in a blowout, showing off how deep the room is, maybe.
I think there's a chance they could feature all 5 running backs in every single game they play this year, Ryan. It just depends on who steps up. So if I were to say to you, okay, Jadarian Price is going to be your every down kick returner. Jeremiah Love's going to be your every down punt returner or vice versa. And your 3-man rotation is Audric, Devin Ford, and Jabron Payne. And then insert any one of those 3 into a return job. And, Jadarian Price. So if Jadarian Price is going to be your number 2 back, then you may not want him on kick returns because you don't want to put that extra volume on him. And you say, well, you only return maybe a couple kicks a game. That's not what I'm talking about. You've got all the returns you've got to work on in practice, all the extra reps you're taking as a returner in practice. It all adds up to putting more wear and tear on your legs because you don't just show up on Saturday and catch a couple kicks, right? Is practice reps that go into it. Maybe he might be better served to rest during those periods if he's your number 2 back. Well, then all of a sudden, maybe Jabron Payne is your kick returner or punt returner and Jeremiah Love's your kick returner, right? So there's a scenario where just the special teams alone allows you to showcase all 5 of your backs in a non-blowout form. I'm not predicting that because, guys like Jaden Greathouse and Micah Bell and, Chris Tyree are all going to have a say on who the returners are this year, right? So Jaden Mickey apparently too. But I could see that alone. It's going to be hard to showcase all 5 in a non-blowout. It is.
A lot of options as return men this year, which is very refreshing, man. Very refreshing. It's been some years where you're just like, ooh, we got a returner on the roster, man.
Oh, yeah. Ryan, we got another one from Notre Dame 2164. It's a recruiting question, so I'll go ahead and ask it and let you answer it. It says, is James Flanagan a different type of tight end than Nate Roberts?
I mean, so I think that they both do different things, but also can work in tandem because they do some things also similarly to me. I mean, they're both kids that are going to be traditional size tight ends when it's all said and done. I mean, James Flanagan's 6'5", 6'5 and a half, and he's already about 230. He's going to be 250 plus pretty easily by the time he gets to college, or at least early on in his college career. Nate Roberts is 6'4 and a half. He's up near 235, 240 pounds now. So he'll be 245, 250 as well. I think the great thing about these players is they're going to be able to work together. I think that both guys can work in line, but I think if you had a tight end tandem of James Flanagan and Nate Roberts, James Flanagan's the inline tight end, and Nate Roberts is kind of that movable chess piece. You can throw him into the slot. You can motion him across. You can work both of them in some 12 personnel to really get both of their great impact into the offense together. So they have some similar quality-ish. They're more traditional sized inline tight ends from just a physical perspective. But I think that Nate brings that versatility that he can line up everywhere. And James can do that a little bit as well. But I think that both of them in tandem can work really well together.
Agree. You nailed it. Differences, but similar, which is kind of where you want to be. Like Holden Stace and Eli Raritan are very different, but also similar in some ways.
It's not like together. Brock Bowers and
Darnell Washington.
Darnell Washington. It's not like polar opposites. They have some similarities to them.
That is a good comparison of two very different tight ends.
Yes. Mr. 2.0 says, thinking about Ivan Taylor, Notre Dame seems to do well with kids who have high-profile parents. Do you think this is because their parents understand the value of 4 for 40, or is there more to it? Well, I think that's the start of it. I mean, that's where it
100%.
begins.
Right.
Yeah, sorry.
No, go ahead, Ryan. You started it, man. You were about to say it. Go ahead. You got it.
I was going to say that if I grew up in a great household of parents that have that type of viewpoints, that's going to rub off on kids, obviously. That's how they were raised, right? I talked to a coach today who he said something great. I was asking him just about, the impact the program has had on this particular athlete. And he said, we're just an extension of the households. That's kind of what we look at, right? So who your parents are, what they value, those things all rub off on kids. So I think most part, you do see a lot of players that gravitate towards Notre Dame that come from great families, great support systems that value those things tremendously. So I do think there's tangibly something there, Mr. 2.0. I just think that that's where it starts, though. That's not necessarily where it starts.
Yeah, it's where it starts. To me, also, what I have found is a lot of former professional athletes definitely value the Notre Dame education because they have seen with their own eyes the challenge of making and keeping money, but also there's been guys who I've interviewed in the past. I can't remember, there's a guy who I interviewed. His son ended up not picking Notre Dame, but the reason the dad really liked Notre Dame, he's like, a lot of my former teammates that played at Notre Dame made more money after their playing career than they did during. And a lot of it tied back to the education they got at Notre Dame and how that set them up for life. They also, I think a lot of former athletes, Ryan, see the fragileness of a career. They saw the great young player whose career got ruined by injury, off the field issues, whatever the case they may be, and saying, hey, if football gets taken away and you've got a degree from here, you can still be very successful in life. And that matters. And that's what helped Stanford during the Harbaugh-Shaw era get some of those guys too. Stanford started getting some of those former professional athletes, kids, and they were beating Notre Dame for them. And a lot of it was just that right there, Ryan, is, hey, I know what a Stanford degree can do for my son. Hey, if you can play in the NFL, you can play anywhere. I mean, these guys play with former FCS players and all this other kind of stuff. But, Alabama can give you this, but Notre Dame can give you this and this. Right. And parents of former athletes see that more because they know how easily $20 million can be gone like that. And what do you have? You got a bunch of injuries, a degree that means nothing from some school that didn't give a rip about educating me. And now what am I going to do with the rest of my life? All the people that were taken from me are gone because I got nothing of value for them. But if this you can't take away, that degree, that education, and more so than the degree, the education is the thing. We all say, well, you get that Notre Dame degree. Well, that's fine. It's just a piece of paper, right? It's the education behind that degree. Todd Light is not incredibly successful in his post-football career because he has a degree from Notre Dame. It's the education, he just has that piece of paper and that allows him to be, no, it's the education he got that led to him getting the degree. And that's what, when I say get that degree, that's what I want people to be clear. That's what I'm referring to. It's that part of it. And a lot of former athletes they see that specifically with former Notre Dame and Stanford players. And that's why I think a lot of them value that, in my opinion.
If someone wants to send me $20 million, I'll see how quickly it goes as well. So somebody wants to send that to me. Salty. You only sent $20 in earlier, so if you got 20 million,
I'm going to ask this in hopes, Ryan. My fingers are crossed that you've seen this. Have you ever seen the movie Brewster's Millions?
Yes.
With Richard.
Yes,
so you could spend a lot of money really quickly if you wanted to. I mean,
I just want to know. I just want to know what it's like. That's all.
I know, right? Yeah.
Nick P said, "Random thought after watching some clips from practice. Am I seeing things, or do the pants look more gold this year?"
They definitely look gold.
Yeah.
I honestly couldn't tell you if they look more gold than past years. I'm going to try to look at some pictures from past years, but I honestly don't have a clue. So I'd have to go look and try to find some older pictures from past practices. But yeah, I'm not sure. But here's the thing: I've always thought the pants at practice looked more gold. They've always been that way. It's the game pants that they don't wear those mustard pants in practice. I don't remember ever seeing that in practice. Like Ryan, you were at practices last year. Did the pants look like the ones they wore in games? They didn't to me.
No.
So I'm not sure. But you guys know me. I'm not like the guy that's like looking at fashion statements. What gloves are they wearing? All that other kind of stuff.
We had a question from Berkshire Yank. If you had to bet who has a better career, Justin Scott or Bryce Young? Justin Scott. Sorry.
If I had to bet.
Yeah.
I mean, if I had to put money on it, I'd put Justin Scott because the floor is higher. Do I think Bryce Young can end up? Could Bryce Young have a better career than Justin Scott? Of course. I mean, it's possible.
Well, that could always happen. Yeah.
But if I'm going to bet, Ryan, I always bet on the guy with the higher floor, not the guy with the higher ceiling.
Right.
Like I know people in the evaluation industry, I'll say, that think that Bryce Young's ceiling is higher than Justin Scott's.
Whew.
Here's my point. Let's grant that premise. Let's accept that premise for argument's sake. Yeah. If I'm betting on who's going to have the better career, I'm going to bet my money and take the risk on the higher floor guy. And right now, Justin Scott on his size alone has the higher floor.
Right.
And people say, well, Justin's raw. Not nearly as raw as Bryant Young is. Because Bryant Young and Justin Scott are both somewhat raw technically. Bryant Young is also raw physically.
Bryce.
Justin is not. Bryce Young. Yeah, Bryant. Well, Bryant was too. I mean, he was 6'3", 240 when he showed up in Notre Dame. He wasn't a dominant nose tackle the minute he showed up. But yes, Bryce. I don't know. I'm sorry. Bryce, you are your own man. Bryce Young. So if I'm betting, I'm going to take that. Would I be shocked if Bryce Young here's why I say, would I be shocked if Bryant Young is better than Justin Scott? No, for a couple reasons. There are enough questions I have about Justin Scott. And you look at Bryce Young's frame, his upside, and his DNA, I wouldn't be shocked if he ends up being better. I'm just not predicting it. And especially if I had to put money on it, definitely not going to do that. I always put money on the higher floor, Ryan, if I were ever to do that. But that's easy to say because I've never actually gambled. But if I did, that would be my philosophy of gambling. All right, Crying Belly. Do you guys have LSU versus Alabama marked on your calendars this year too? I do, because it's going to be a huge. Forget if Brian Kelly was not the head coach at LSU. Yes, I'd have that game marked on my calendar because it's going to be a big game in college football. And I always have.
It's a good rivalry.
I have Florida State, Clemson marked on my calendar. I have Florida State, LSU marked on my calendar. I have tons of big games marked on my calendar. Michigan, East Carolina. Oh, wait, no, Michigan doesn't play any big games out of conference. But no, I mean, in all seriousness, I always have big games marked on my calendar. I love those things. I mean, I love those games in college football. Yeah. So, yeah, I do. I don't know.
It's a really good rivalry, too.
Yeah.
Both fan bases don't like each other. So,
multiple national champions in the last 15, 20, you know what I mean? So, yeah. And though, to me, that is going to be the cream of the crop in the West this year as of right now. And so, Does LSU supplant Alabama? Because honestly, Ryan, if LSU beats Bama again this year, you have to ask yourself, are they the new SEC West power? I mean, whatever you feel about Brian Kelly, you look at, the last 4 years, they had the same number of titles. And LSU is now, with the new coaches, beating Bama twice. Bama's descending. LSU's ascending. LSU's now the new big dog. I mean, that's what we're saying in the Big Ten now, right? Right now, Michigan's the new big dog in the Big Ten. Ohio State's got to prove they can beat them. It'd be the same thing if LSU beats them again this year. I don't think it's going to happen, but I don't think Alabama's going to crush them either. I think it's going to be another really good football game because they're both talented football. LSU's talented. Bama's not as talented as they've been. They're still very talented. I think it's going to be a great game. Absolutely great game.
We had Beefeater, ND08. What's up, Beefeater? What is your best game day tailgate hack for home games? Mine is Gold Bond, medicated powder, and a ton of water. Okay.
So mine is bring a chair. Like that's because I don't drink. I don't walk around a ton pregame. I shouldn't say this. I don't drink alcohol. I drink, obviously, liquids, but I just don't drink alcohol, and I don't walk around a ton. What I would say is if you're talking about like the need for Gold Bond, medicated powder, and water is because you're going to be on your feet a lot. So I would say very comfortable shoes. I think both of those are good. But for me, I don't do tailgates a lot. When I do, it's hours. So I'm just there. I don't move around a lot. So I don't know that I've ever I think once, the first time I went to a Notre Dame game, Ryan, I did the whole around campus thing my first time.
Yeah.
That was really it. Now it's just you come to our, I go to our thing and, you're there.
Mr. 2.0 had a funny comment there, which was pretty awesome.
And Brian doesn't drink. That's a great comment.
That's fantastic.
That's very well played.
Yes.
I don't drink that either. I don't drink.
Water is a good one though, Beefeater.
Yeah.
Always stay hydrated.
And honestly, if you're going to be, I would also encourage you to maybe have a Gatorade that you chug in the middle too, to kind of electrolytes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. If you're going to be out in the sun all day and walking around a lot and very active, that would be a good one too. But obviously, a good old H2O.
A hat's another good one. Always bring a hat.
Yeah, especially if you don't have a lot of hair, and neither Ryan nor I necessarily have big, thick, full heads of hair. I have a buzz cut. Ryan,
I might grow mine out. I might grow
your out a little bit. Okay.
Yeah.
So, but yeah,
might get the flow.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. You have fun with that.
Nikki D21, Ryan and Brian. If Notre Dame beats Ohio State, give a small chance of flipping Justin Scott back to Notre Dame.
Sure. It increases the odds, not by a ton, but it certainly helps.
Definitely better.
Definitely helps.
Yeah.
Notre Dame's not giving up on him. And right now, what did Justin Scott say? Hey, I think this place gives me a better chance to win a championship. That's one of the things he said. Well, if Notre Dame can beat them, it might prove that they can be that team too. It won't be like, oh my gosh, Justin Scott's going to flip to Notre Dame tomorrow. But does it help? Sure. Absolutely.
Definitely helps. Crystal Rose said, which conference would want Notre Dame the most? The Big Ten, ACC, or SEC? I think all of them would want Notre Dame. I mean, I think there'd be a little bit of a bidding war.
I will say this. The one that wants Notre Dame the most, to me, that's actually an easy answer. It's the ACC.
ACC. Yeah, because they're allegiance to other sports. Yeah,
because also, Ryan, they need Notre Dame. The Big Ten and the SEC want Notre Dame. I wouldn't say that either of them necessarily need Notre Dame.
Mm-hmm.
The ACC, if the ACC is going to survive, they need to make some changes. And one of the things that could save the ACC, and we've already seen it happen, is for Notre Dame to join them in football. I mean, go look at the revenue that those schools generated from TV deals the year that Notre Dame joined the league. Despite the fact it was COVID and they were splitting revenue with an additional team, because people tuned in, man, in a big way. Notre Dame helped them a ton. So I would say the conference that wants them the most would be the ACC, because there's some, it is, Ryan. It's the desperation of it.
Yeah.
Of it would mean if Notre Dame said, hey, you know what? We're going to join a conference. We're going to go to the highest bidder. We need you to do A, B, C, and D. Like, you want to get in the negotiation with the desperate team, with the desperate conference. And to me, the ACC would be the desperate one. They would give you more. The Big Ten is like, look, we'll give you certain concessions of who you're going to play, but that's about it. The SEC, they don't need to necessarily. Notre Dame doesn't need the Big Ten. The Big Ten doesn't need Notre Dame. They may partner together someday, but neither one needs each other.
Right.
The ACC needs Notre Dame, so they'd be more willing to give a lot of the concessions that Notre Dame would most likely ask for and should ask for. Like, why else leave being independent? That would be my guess.
Nikki D21 says, I know it's been said, but going 11-1 or by chance 12-0 will solve a lot. Recruiting, retaining players, and getting upgraded coaches and coaching. Yeah, I mean, it
Agree.
solves a lot of issues. Solves a lot of
100%.
issues.
100%.
Retaining players is kind of an interesting one in there, though, because like I would argue that you might lose more players if you do really well to that degree. But I mean,
it would depend. My whole thing, Ryan, is I've always found like with Bama,
yeah,
Bama doesn't have has never had the transfers out that people might think.
I guess
And
I was
usually,
thinking more like going pro early type of thing. Because if you go 12-0,
I
you
gotcha.
probably had some breakouts this year.
Yes,
like
like
some
LSU did
breakouts.
19. That's a good point,
Yeah,
Ryan.
right,
Yeah, I was
right.
thinking transfers. If you're from an NFL standpoint, yes, you are correct.
Yeah. Like Jordan Botelho probably had double-digit sacks if you went 12-0 this year. Like that.
Riley
type of
Mills
dude,
is probably gone.
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
Cam Hart, Xavier Watts. Well, it's Cam Hart for sure, but Xavier
Yeah.
Watts, yeah, guys like that. But
yeah,
I was more thinking transfers.
gotcha.
You know, because
guys you'll be
say,
able to retain more people that way
yeah.
for sure.
But yeah, that's a good point, Ryan. You're definitely going to lose more guys to the NFL if that happens. If you go 12, especially if you go 12-0.
I agree. Joseph Rimes, excuse me if I'm pronouncing it wrong. Does Ohio State really have the second best defensive line in the country?
So Ryan, this comes down to a list from your boy Max Chadwick at Pro Football Focus.
I know Max.
And he has Ohio State with the number 2 defensive line in the country behind Georgia. He has Michigan at number 3, Illinois at 4, Florida State at 5.
Oh, Illinois needs to be higher. Needs to be higher.
To me, Illinois has the best D line in the Big Ten. That's yes. LSU 6, Bama 7, UCLA 8, Miami.
UCLA's got some dudes coming back too.
Yep, Miami 9, and Penn State 10. Look, here's what it comes down to for me, Ohio State, Ryan. I'm going to say this, and then you can handle it. Could Ohio State end up with the second best defensive line in the country? Yes, they could. Should they be ranked number 2 right now going the season? Absolutely not. I don't even think right now, just what we know of these, that they're even the second best defensive line in the Big Ten right now. What they have is a lot of 5-star players that flash.
Yeah.
But they don't produce at an elite level like they should. Jack Sawyer is considered a big-time player for one reason and one reason only, because he was a top 5 national player coming out of high school. He's never actually played like that. Yeah. I actually think JT is the only of the 2 former 5-star ends that played a bunch. JT, to me, is a far better player than Jack Sawyer. Far better. Yeah. I mean, he turned that Penn State game around last year almost by himself. Last year in the second half. Jack Sawyer was always overrated. He was never a top 5 national player. Is he still very good? Yeah, he's a talented player, but he's not what he was. It just comes down to that. Like I've seen like 4 different D linemen from Ohio State be projected as first-round draft picks. Actually 5, actually. And look, they have talent. They could end up being one of the 2 best, but they got a lot to prove, man. A lot to prove to me before I can go there. JT right now is to me the only elite guy. But I like Michael Hall. I think he's a really good player. Tyleek Williams is back too, isn't he?
Very talented. Yep. Very talented.
Very good player. There's a lot of talent there. They just have to prove it. And right now, that's a lot of projection for having them number 2 in the country. A lot of projection. In my opinion.
I would they're not the second best defensive line coming back in college football right now, no doubt. If the article was strictly written off second most talented defensive line coming back, then because then you could say like you just named 4 like very talented players. There's no doubt. I agree with you that they're not finished products. They're not producers at this point. Illinois has the best defensive line coming back in college football, probably at least in the Big Ten. I mean, you have Drazon Newton, you have Keith Randolph inside, who are both dudes on the interior. You have Seth Coleman, who's a very underrated defensive end, and you have number 17's name is like Gabriel Jacques, who was a freshman All-American last year, had like 4.5 sacks or 5 sacks. Like Illinois has got some dogs coming back on the defensive line, so they deserve their mention. They deserve to be way higher than they are.
Yeah, agree. I just, that's just kind of typical pro football folk. They have one guy that does everything for college football now, which is just like, okay. Like, I mean, honestly, like right now of what we know, and I'm going to ask you this, Ryan, this is a genuine question. Right now, off what we know about these players, what we have seen them do in college, would you have Ohio State over Florida State? I wouldn't. What would you? Especially
on the defensive line?
With Braden Fisk obviously being added as well.
Oh, yeah. Braden got, Yeah.
You got Jared Verse coming back. You had the two really good freshmen last year, Patrick Payton, Joshua Farmer. I believe Derek McClendon's coming back. You've got a couple other young guys coming back. And then you add
D tackle came back too. I can't remember his name.
But Fabian Lovett, talking about him.
Yeah, Lovett came back.
Yeah,
Yep.
and then you add Braden Fisk to the equation. I mean, right now, that's a much more proven defensive line from a production standpoint than Ohio State. I mean, again, who is the big-time dominant player at Ohio State right now that can match Jared Verse? I don't even think JT is that yet. He's had his moments where he's like, oh, man, that guy's going to have a ton of talent. Jared Verse was a guy that took over ball games last year.
Yeah.
In big ball
against
games
LSU last year.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
It was nuts.
Oh, yeah. But here he finished with 17 tackles for loss last year, right? He only had 2.5 only. He only had 2.5 against LSU. Point being, it wasn't like the year Jerron Jones had 11 and like 6 of them came against Miami.
Right.
That's what I mean by only 2.5. He didn't have that one game where like a third of his tackles for loss came in like a game against, somebody that sucked. I mean, he had 2.5 against Oklahoma, 2.5 against Georgia Tech, 2.5 against Wake, 2.5 against LSU. Missed a game. He had at least a half a tackle for loss in every game but one, and it was the game he got hurt in against Louisville.
Yeah.
Like, that's a level of consistency that you really want to see.
Kid's a monster, man.
Yes. Had 4.5 sacks in the last 5 games of the year. Like, he's a really good football player. Really good football player.
Started at Albany, man. Started at Albany.
Yeah. I don't like that list. I mean, I'll tell you what, the way that people rank Ohio State's roster coming back, if they don't win every game by 14 points, then Ryan Day should be fired. I mean, the way that people hype up this football team, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. I'm like, you guys do okay. I'm not gonna get into it, but yes, it's nuts. Is this a incredibly talented football team? Yes, it is. It is. It is.
Yeah.
Are they as talented as some past Ohio State teams? No, they're not. I mean, they're just not. They're loaded at a couple positions, and they're not as good as they've been at. I mean, like linebacker, they got good talent at linebacker. I love Tommy Eichenberg, but let's not forget this is a team that one year had Raekwon McMillan, Josh Perry, and Darian Lee at linebacker, and Curtis Grant at linebacker. You know what I mean? Like, what was the year, Ryan? They had like 5 first or second round NFL draft picks in their secondary. The 2015 team was that way. They had another year that was similar to that. The 2019 secondary was pretty loaded too. With
remember when they had you remember when they had AJ Hawk, Bobby Carpenter, and James Laurinaitis was a backup.
Yeah.
So
they've
had some pretty good linebackers in the years.
And you look at their team now. Are they talented? Yes. Are they this team that's got Ryan? I literally have seen 12 different Ohio State players mocked in the first round of this next year's draft. That's just, come on, guys. What are we doing here? Like, Bama in their heyday wasn't getting that. Like, it's just it's getting silly with some of the stuff about Ohio State. It's just weird.
We had a question from Jason Rose who said, how hypocritical is Lane Kiffin saying that the transfer portal is destroying college football? He has the name Portal King for a reason. The guy brought in 2 quarterbacks in the same offseason.
I can't stand comment. With all Jason, this isn't – please don't take this the wrong way. But I really dislike comments like this because the transfer portal is the rule. He is following the rules while advocating for what needs to be done to change them to be better for the game, in his opinion. He'd be an idiot not to take advantage of the rules as they are in place. To me, I view him as being honest because I believe that the transfer portal, if it goes back to the way it used to be, hurts Ole Miss, in my opinion. Because they can't just go out there and get 2 transfer quarterbacks in the same offseason and can't go get some of the guys they've added to their roster. So I have no problem with it. The rules are you can do this.
Yeah.
And he doesn't like the rule. So he should take a stand and not do it. Why? That's like, why? Like, I don't like the rule. It's the rule, and I need to keep my job. And so I'm going to do it to make sure that my football team has what it needs to be successful. But it shouldn't be this way because I don't think this is good for the game. Maybe he's being disingenuous and he's doing it to benefit himself. But I'm not a big Lane Kiffin fan, to be honest with you, Ryan. Like, just full disclosure, I'm not a big Lane Kiffin fan. But his takes on the transfer portal, to me, seem very genuine, in my opinion. I could be completely wrong. But he's kind of a wear his emotions on his sleeve kind of guy. Like, he's not like a tactical. He just kind of like, did you see him at the SEC? Like, he looked hungover. His like hair's all like jacked up. The guy asked him, people say that I look like, that was the dumbest question I've ever seen.
I didn't even hear that one.
Some guy says, I often get mistaken for, people think I look like you, blah, blah. And he went on the song and he's like, what do you think about that?
Oh my
Lane
God.
Kiffin just kind of looks at him and goes, that might've been the longest question. That's the most weird question. And then he starts talking about it. He's like, it's just, he tried to give a serious answer, but it's like, how is that person credentialed to be at the SEC Media Day? Like, what in the world are we talking about? People think I look like you. What do you think about that? Like, I think that you're not a serious person. I have more important things to do with my day. That's what I would have said.
Seriously.
But I do think it's a genuine take. I could be completely wrong. He could be completely, this is in his best interest question. I don't know, or opinion, but I think it's genuine. But I just feel like, man, like,
be mad at the people that made it this way, not the person asking it to change. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
It's not like he's trying to change in a way that only helps him.
Right.
He doesn't like the rule, but this is the rule now, and yeah, I don't know, man. I don't understand why people have this take of, if you're going to be against something, it means you shouldn't do it, even if it's the rules.
Right.
Like, okay, if I don't believe if I'm someone who does not believe that the highway speed limit should be 100 miles an hour, it should be 50. I'm just making a point. And I'm on the highway. I'm not driving 50 to set an example, because it's dangerous. Right. Like, I'm going to go faster because you have to stay up with the flow of traffic to a degree. But I can say, this is silly. So you either stay off the highway but what if the only way to get everywhere you need to go is on the highway?
Right. And
the only way I can keep my job and keep this and keep that is if I get on the highway. I mean, you kind of got to do what you need to do, but also say, hey, I'm gonna use my name to push back and say, this needs to change. This is silly. This isn't right. So I don't think that's hypocritical at all. I don't think it's hypocritical at all. I don't.
Yeah.
What would be hypocritical if he would just say, I don't think poaching players off of other people's rosters is wrong. And then you find out he's poaching players.
Right.
He's behind the scenes. Now, if you were to tell me that, Jason, I'd be on there with you, right? Because that's not legal. That's against the rules. That's why I think Brent Venables' comments about recruiting, committed players, that's incredibly hypocritical. Incredibly hypocritical. And kudos to Notre Dame for saying, we're not going to let our committed players take official visits.
Right.
But you know what else we're not going to do? Let committed players to other schools take official visits. That's not hypocritical. Brent Venables says a lot of dumb stuff that's hypocritical to me.
He does. Yes,
right?
He does.
Like, kids don't understand the word commitment, blah, 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 blah. Well, why are you out there recruiting other committed players?
Right.
You know what I mean? And negatively recruiting against the other schools. Like, you're full of crap. Lane Kiffin, to me, is like, these are the rules. I'm going to live by them, but I don't like them. And I think they should change. So that's my 2 cents on that. And we got 2 more, Ryan, and we're going to get out of here.
Tyler Evans with the super chat. Thank you so much, Tyler. I was watching the ACC Media Day, and Pat Narduzzi said NIL needs to have a salary cap. What do you guys think of his comments? I just don't know how you would regulate it.
I completely agree with that, Ryan, because what the NCAA should do is the day after they set salary caps for coaches and coaching staffs, they should then set a salary cap for players. So when they cap your salary as a head football coach and your assistant coaches, then sure, let's salary cap. Like football coaches drive me nuts sometimes. We talked earlier about being tone deaf. Why do you want to put a salary cap on players when you don't have one?
Right.
So this is the opposite of the Lane Kiffin thing. Do you support salary? I would ask, this is my response. I would say to Pat Narduzzi. Do you support salary caps for coaches and coaching staffs? He might say yes because he knows it benefits him because they can't keep up with other places.
Right.
So, Coach, would you say it's okay? Because, look, Coach, I mean, listen, public schools around the country are really hurting for money. We're having an inflation problem. We're having a supply chain problem. We just really need to get to a position where, schools are better set spending their resources on other things. So we're going to cap the head coaching salary for every head coach in the country at $1 million, and you can only spend $1 million on your assistant coaches. Do you think Pat Narduzzi would be like, yeah, that sounds great? No, he wouldn't. He wouldn't like that. Why are we doing that for players? Right. Now, here's what I would do if you want to make this right. Collectives, to me, would have caps. Collectives can only give X amount of dollars to each player. Collectives. So a collective can raise money enough to spend X amount of dollars on each player should get $20,000 from a collective per year, something like that, right? Like put a cap on that. But then NIL, which is a different thing to me, should not have caps. The cap should be, what is a business willing to pay my starting quarterback? If a business views the Notre Dame quarterback as being worth $2 million to market and hawk his products, then he should be allowed to do that if it's a genuine exchange of services or goods, right? So if I view you as bringing value to my business as a part of my marketing strategy, and I think by using Caleb Williams from USC as my lead spokesperson, that I can increase my revenue X amount of millions of dollars, which means it's worth me paying $1 million to Caleb Williams to be my lead ad guy, then I should be allowed to pay him $1 million. What I should not be allowed to do is be a USC alum who thinks this kid should be a great quarterback for me. So I give him $1 million, and all you got to do is show up one Saturday and do some speaking thing, and there you go. That's not what NIL should be about, to me. That's what you've said, Bart. That's pay for play.
Yeah.
I don't like that. But if a company believes that an athlete is worth X amount of dollars to his company as part of you, I'm taking advantage of your name, image, and likeness to bring value to my business, then there should be no caps on that. So that to me, there needs to be two separate things. The collective should only be allowed to give X amount of dollars per players. Make it this amount for Power 5, this amount for Group of 5 if you want, but it can't. It's not. It's a nationwide thing. If you are a part of, if you don't want to do it, then don't be part of the NCAA. But you can give, let's say, like $20,000 a semester. So that's how collectives can kind of, you want to pay players without making employees, which is something that people are saying. Collectives are saying we want to be able to pay players without making employees. I think that's smart. I don't want players to be employees because of all the things that come with it. But if you want to say, hey, look, let's let the collectives be the ones that are essentially responsible for paying players, and it goes to every player. You don't give this amount to the quarterback. You don't give this amount to the first string quarterback, this amount to the fifth string quarterback. It's every player that's on scholarship makes this amount of money, and walk-ons can make up to this amount of money per year. Let's do it. And then let NIL be a separate thing. That's what I would support with no caps on the NIL part. Because that, to me, I'm a free market guy. I'm a true capitalism guy, not like the crony corporatist capitalism we got now, but like true capitalism, free exchange of ideas, free trade. If you mean something to me, if you bring value to me, and I think I should me paying you this amount is going to be good for my business, then I should be allowed to do that, right? If I think having Sam Hartman host a show at Irish Breakdown is going to be worth X amount of dollars, and I'm willing to pay him because he's going to bring that value to me, there should be no cap on that. Now, I wouldn't be able to afford Sam Hartman. I'm just making the point. Why should there be a cap on that? If I'm willing to pay more to genuinely help my business, why should there be a cap on that? There shouldn't be. And this nonsense of coaches, like you just go shut up and just go coach football, please, Pat Narduzzi. Like you come up with the stupidest things all the time about how shut up and go coach football, right? Because you don't understand. Like you don't understand this. Well, it's this. No, just shut up and go coach football. We'll handle all this grown-up stuff over here. You know what I mean? Because players should be able to capitalize on their name, image, and likeness. The problem is NIL is being used and abused for a lot of other things, right? Yeah. And I somewhat understand his sensitivity to it because of what happened with the Jordan Addison thing. But then change the transfer rule, put bigger teeth behind tampering, like the NFL does. You know why teams in the NFL rarely tamper, if ever? Because they don't want to have to deal with the consequences that happen if they do, Ryan.
Lose a first-round pick.
And millions of dollars.
Yep.
And some people get fired. It's just not worth it. You know what I mean? So they don't tamper. Well, the NCAA doesn't have those type of punishments involved. So there are plenty of rules you can change to eliminate the cheating that NIL is being used to do, without saying, like, salary cap, to me, you're not fixing anything. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. What are you fixing by putting a salary cap on this? You're not fixing anything. Guys are still going to poach your players. They're just going to go back to doing it the way they used to do it, which is, well, we'll give you whatever the cap number is, but don't worry. We're going to do this little side piece to your mom or your girlfriend or whatever else case may be. Yeah, that's not going to change. So make it an out front and honest thing. Hey, and then make it to where an NIL deal is not tied to you being at a specific school. Right? Do that.
Mm-hmm.
There's all types of things you can do, Ryan, to get rid of the pay for play model, but also not say we're going to make sure that the quarterback at Alabama and Notre Dame can't make any more money than the quarterback at Troy. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard of. That's dumb. And you're going to get sued for that and lose, in my opinion. Like you lose every other case because you constantly come up with stupid rules that are actually not meant to be friendly to the players and all that other stuff. It's just meant to benefit the schools. So cap collectives, make it every player gets X amount of dollars. Now you've solved the whole, pay for play thing. Everybody gets the same. And now there's value in NIL. And NIL is a true exchange of services like it's meant to be. Your name, image, and likeness means this amount of money to my company. And I want to be willing to pay you that. And this is what I ask in return. And then there we go. Not, hey, I'd love to see you playing quarterback at Notre Dame. Here's X amount of dollars to get you here. Well, what do I got to do? Just show up at a couple meet and greets and that's it. You're not actually bringing value to me as a business.
No.
I'm now a fan that has money to buy you. That's not what NIL is supposed to be, right? And I think you and I are, on that part at least, are 100% on the same page, at least on that part.
Yeah, I mean, it's the separation that I think is the biggest thing for me, is that everyone just groups it all into the same bucket, and it's just like, that's not the same bucket. Like, I mean, where's the money going? Where is it coming from? There's a lot of factors that people like to ignore because everyone makes money, and it's just like, nope, that's not actually pay for play. That's not actually NIL. So it's just very unfortunate that, again, we're asking coaches of individual programs these questions to begin with, because nobody up top is actually helping anyone.
Right.
And then stupid things follow that. So
yes. And Pat Narduzzi would definitely not be on my committee of let's find answers to this. Pat Narduzzi would not be on my select committee of people with good ideas to come up with solutions to fix this problem. So that guy drives me nuts.
Oh, Pat.
It's like, dude, just stop, Pat. You're not helping yourself. Because it's like Eli Drinkwitz said something stupid like this, right?
Oh, he always does. Yeah.
And it's like, you guys are not helping your cause at all. Like, just when fans start to get sick of the NIL the way it is now, a coach comes out and says something so utterly stupid that you're like, no, screw it. I'm back on board with just do whatever. Just pay him. You know what I mean? Like, you guys are so dumb. Shut your freaking pie holes. Coach football. And, we can figure this other stuff out in another way. But, or only X amount of coaches are allowed to talk on it. If you say something stupid, the AFCA gets involved and says, okay, you've lost your privileges on talking about NIL because you say stupid things that hurt our cause. And Eli Drinkwitz did that. This whole salary cap thing is just silly. It's just dumb. And I can't stand it. Especially coming from Pat Narduzzi. It would annoy me if anybody says it, but he just is like the king of saying really stupid things. Yeah. That's my dislike of Pat Narduzzi. I can't stand that guy. I cannot. Oh, goodness gracious. All right. A couple more here, Ryan, from Archer.
Archer says, Joe Burrow was carted off after practice with non-contact calf injury. Do you think there needs to be more research into cleat and turf technology? I'm all for helping student athletes, helping athletes, have the best possible outcomes, right? So that for me is, yes, there should definitely be, if these are continuing to happen, these non-contact injuries, I think that there needs to be continue to be investment there, because that is what makes you money at the end of the day, right? If I'm an NFL team or if I'm the NFL in general, like, those athletes make you the money. So I think that you should invest back into them without question.
Well, and it's also just being a decent human being you want to take care of your people too, right? I mean, I'm all for, you should always be an R&D in that. Ryan, I'm a big believer that if you're a company that creates a goods or a service to somebody, you should always be looking at R&D to make it better. right? You should always have
Yep.
an R&D budget to make it better. Do I think an injury to Joe Burrow and a non-contact it means that all of a sudden now we need more? No, I don't think more. I mean, injuries happen. I don't care how technologically advanced you have outside of bubbles, putting guys in big giant bubbles where they can't bend anything or break anything or wherever else where you actually aren't playing football anymore. Guys are going to get hurt. Right. So does an injury like this need to spur? What I would say is the only time something like that would be true, Ryan, is if we started to see a pattern like we've seen from people talk about the Under Armour cleats. There is a pattern here where the people that wear this brand of shoe have X injuries at an X higher percentage than everybody else. Now you need to be investing more into your R&D to fix this problem. But a player getting hurt, that's part of the game. I need to see a pattern before I would advocate for more. It should always be an important part of what you're doing. But Joe Burrow getting hurt doesn't mean, oh no, we need to do this. Like, would you be asking this question if it was like Ryan Finley got carted off of practice? No, it's because it's a starter. So all of a sudden there needs to be more R&D. You know what I mean? Into this. I don't necessarily buy that, Ryan. I think helmets, shoulder pads, cleats, turf, all things that involve player safety should always be how can we make it better? How can we make it better? And then make sure you're spending the time testing these things out over a period of time to make sure you've got better results as opposed to just we have this idea, let's run with it. You know what I mean? Oh, didn't work out how we hoped. I don't know that that's necessarily happening. I'm just saying like you need to be careful. It should always be part of what you do. But just an injury to one guy, to me, doesn't mean all of a sudden it's a problem that we need to get addressed. Right? I just like Tom Brady's injury, I feel like is something that sparked a rule change in the NFL that wasn't necessary and only happened because it was Tom Brady that got hurt. Like that's my stance. Like there's certain, like, I don't like guys being able to dive at a quarterback's knee, but it got overreacted to so greatly, Ryan, is kind of where I'm coming from. I think it's probably a better way of saying it because it happened to Tom Brady. If it would have happened to somebody else, Matt Castle in a preseason game, they're not going out immediately changing the rule, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's my sense. It's 2 cents on that. Last question here, Ryan, and then we'll get out of here.
Beefeater ND08 says, which running back had the best combo of speed and power?
Best combo of speed and power on the current roster?
If healthy, probably Jadarian Price, I guess.
Him or Jabron Payne would be my top two, actually. Jabron's got a lot more juice, I think, than people think. But I would agree with you, Ryan. It's going to be one of the two sophomores. I would probably lean towards Jadarian, but Jabron's got a little bit more beef to him. I'll have to send you a picture that Angela took from practice yesterday. So, yeah.
Maybe Jeremiah Love in a couple years, but as of right now, it's Jadarian for me.
Yep. I think so. I think he's I'll say this. Here's how I would look at it. You'd have to answer the question this way, Ryan. You'd have to look at it this way. Jadarian's faster, so he has the speed. Jabron's more powerful of just individually of those two skills. So the answer comes down to who's more at one than over the other. And so if I had to pick one, I'd say I would probably lean towards the difference in speed is greater of Jadarian's advantage is probably greater than the difference in power between Jabron and Jadarian. And so that's where I would say I'd lean toward with you with Jadarian, but I think Jabron right now is the only other person that's in this conversation for me because Audric doesn't have the speed to be in the conversation. And Devin Ford doesn't have either. He's more shifty, elusive, and those type of things. And Jeremiah Love doesn't have the power. He's a speed guy. So that's where I get from those two. But I'm with Ryan. I would probably go with Jadarian. But it'd be a little tougher decision for me. I think Jabron's in that. And I think if you, Ryan, I wish you were standing next to me at practice yesterday and today because I think if you saw Jabron, the juice he had, you'd be like, okay, it's a little bit more than what we saw last year. I'm looking. I can't wait for people to see this running back room, man. I can't wait. It is so talented. It really is, man. It just gets, and we knew it was going to be, right? Like you and I have been talking about this a lot this offseason. Like this is a talented running back room. And I think partly what excites me is because when you do kind of get into a situation where, hey, I'm excited about this group and then I see them and they're better than expected. you kind of start getting a little bit like, okay, that's a great place to be. That's a great place to be. All right. So that, Ryan, that's going to do it. Why don't you go and take us out of here, man? We're going
Thank
to
you,
get out of here
everybody.
under the 5-minute mark, under the 4-hour mark. We're going to do it.
Thank you, everyone, for joining today on the Irish Breakdown podcast. If you missed any of the beginning sections, we did a little bit of a post-practice observation from day 2 of Notre Dame fall camp. Also talked a little 2025 quarterbacks, as well as previewed some of the visitors that you should be expecting on campus, both 2024 commits, 2025 recruits alike this week. So before you leave, you just hit that like button, subscribe to the podcast, hit that notification bell. 5-star reviews on all of your favorite podcast platforms are always very appreciated. Go to boards@irishbreakdown.com for continued analysis from both the team and recruiting perspective. We will catch you all tonight on IB Nation Sports Talk and back tomorrow for another post-practice observation and the weekly Friday free-for-all mailbag. So from Ryan, that is Brian. Thank you all so much for joining us today on the Irish Breakdown podcast.